On a phone call, Rio is told to stay calm and listen as they explain the call is about his parents' death. The boy lies in front of a truck, his consciousness fading, and people say it may all have been destiny. At first he didn't feel fear or relief, only a small, unexplained remorse and a little pity for himself because the next day would have been his 20th birthday. Arriving in a new world, he found new adventures and real magic. He clashed with a woman and faced other enemies. He actually fought many others. His full story will be told in time, especially because the idea of reincarnation sounds like fantasy. To look after us who are reading this story. To him, it was real. In a completely white room, the boy can appear. When asked by a voice, his real name is Miara. He confirms their report that they haven't had any visitors in a while and that he died in an accident. A man keeps saying that, in rare cases, people from his world are reincarnated during the transfer between worlds after they die. On our planet, it is called Samsara, and Rio was the chosen one this time. Seeing the boy confused, the man says the choice is simple and that the boy can be reborn in another world with all his memories intact. Surprised, the boy says he feels like he was reincarnated as an ice guy. The man agrees that it would be a good way to explain the situation, and Rio, looking thoughtful, says he has some questions for the man. When first asked if the man was God, he denied it and said the man would seem like an angel to the boy. Although it's only trivial information, the boy plans to call the man False Michael and wonders if his thoughts can be read. The second question asked why he is being reincarnated. The angel explains they are not the ones who make the decisions. The being the boy calls God made the decision and did not explain the reason to the angel. The third question was what to do in his new world, since he was still confused. The angel says calmly he is to live as he wishes, and no one gave instructions on how the boys should behave. Pleased with the answer, the boy believes anyone can live any life and be at peace, so he accepts the proposal. Pleased that Rio accepted, the angel prepares to tell him about his new world. False Michael said the new world was very similar to Earth, but it had magic and gunpowder, and firearms were rare. When the protagonist asks if the new world truly has magic, he is told that Earth once had magic too, but today it is no longer practiced. As the boy learns that Earth once had magic, the angel gets ready to show him the new world. A glow appears before the boy as the new world is named Phi, and the smiling angel says 1 in 5 people has an aptitude for magic, and that Rio will have a gift for water magic. Disappointed, the boy asks if he can change his aptitude from water to fire or earth, but Michael lies and says no changes can be made. He explains that magical aptitudes are given by the gods, and in the new world they are set at birth and never change. Rio then asks whether he will be stuck with water magic for the rest of his life. With a slight smile, the angel explains that water aptitude is very important because humans cannot live without it. Also, since 80% of humans in FI can use magic, the boy was very lucky, and Rio thinks humans need water and sodium to survive, so in a medieval world not having to worry about water is a big advantage. A sudden idea forms that the angel of water magic has healing power, but the angel says healing belongs to light magic, and the boy accepts this with disappointment. The angel explains elemental magic to the boy and tells him there are other kinds that are not elemental. He should focus on his water magic. He explains that the boy's physical abilities are above average, and that in 5 the system is based not on levels or skills, but on hard work. The boy asks how he can improve his physical and magical skills. Like on Earth, 5 humans can improve their physical abilities through exercise and training. The angel finishes by saying that if Rio commits to evolving, he will evolve. Worried, the boy thinks that if he does not work very hard, he will not get far in this new world. After a few more explanations, False Michael asked Ria what she wanted to do. Our boy replies carefully that he wants to live a peaceful life in a remote place. The angel smiles and says you will reincarnate him in the Rondo forest. Leave 2 months' worth of food and tell them to use the 100-meter barrier around the house. Rio will need to learn to use his magic for hunting, and there is a beach southwest of the house where he can extract salt from the water once he develops his water magic. Realizing he forgot the most important question, Rio turns to the angel and asks how to use magic. False Michael says he just needs to clearly picture the magic and train a lot, because nobody is good at it at first, and the protagonist says he'll do his best and thanks the angel for all his help. It happened in the blink of an eye. The Rio wakes up in a bed. The boy starts to get out of bed, inside what looks like a rudimentary cabin. Getting up to leave the room, he says the cabin looks like something out of a movie and doesn't even seem new. As you leave the room, you see a rough table with 2 books on it and a few chairs. Our boy ignores the books and starts exploring the rest of the cabin. In one room, he sees it bathed and remembers that the Romans used public. Basking, he mentally thanks himself for having one all to himself, thinks the false Michael must have made it for him because false Michael is Japanese, and realizes he still does not know the angel's gender. A few minutes later, he remembers the books on the table, goes back to check them, and finds one is a compilation about monsters, while the others are about local forums. A note signed by the fake Michael says the food is in the silo outside the house, which also serves as a freezer, and he realizes he was indeed reading his mind. Rio tells himself he has no appraisal skills. As a classic Eskai Chi, he remembers the angel warned him it would be like that. Also carrying a knife, he fastens it to his belt, scans the area, finds nothing else, and prepares to leave. Stepping out of the cabin, he is amazed by the vastness and the beauty of the place with its wide, open area. He looks toward the distant mountains and says dragons and other beasts probably live there. Point out it's safer to stay away, then as you come to. Taking in the landscape, he finally realizes he is truly in another world. False Michael imagines how nice it would be if you could one day have a physical body and live as peacefully as Rio. Immediately after, he realizes he forgot to tell him how strong his magic is, even by face standards. Certain the boy will notice eventually, the angel looks at the boy's screen, discovers a hidden ability, and wonders how it got there. He remembers seeing this in a girl when he first began working with Reincarnation 10,000 years ago, and wonders what his true ability might be. His screen shows that Rio's hidden ability is eternal youth. In his new world of magic and swords, Rio is eager to try his new abilities. Water magic is the only skill he can use, and he remembers False Michael's advice to visualize it and practice. Focus on thinking about water when the boy closes his eyes. Startled, he opens his eyes to see bubbles of water floating above his raised hands and realizes it's the first time he's used magic. Remembering False Michael's lessons and watching his water bubble fall to the ground, he realizes he doesn't have to recite spells and wonders whether the laws of physics are the same here. He also remembers the angel's warning about the barrier and that he must be well prepared for battle before leaving its protection. He could not go beyond the 100-meter boundary of his barrier unless he was prepared to fight. They had only 2 months before the food in the silo ran out, and the only weapon False Michael left him with was a knife. Even on Earth, it would be impossible to kill a wild boar with a simple knife, so monsters and fire were completely out of the question that left Rio with only one other weapon option as he filled his baths with water. He believed the key to his magic was picturing what he wanted. Still deep in thought, you visualize the phenomenon called hydrogen bonding, because if he understands how he wants to create works, he only needs to imagine them. He used it to form a thin lens of water or ice, and to boil water and melt ice. He suddenly collapses on the bathroom floor. On his 5th day, exhausted, he realizes he has drained all of his magic. In the firelit morning, he cooks a rabbit leg to eat. At the silo, he notices that the only seasoning False Michael left for him was salt, along with some kind of magic that keeps the food frozen. Rio had been perfecting his process for preparing and cooking meat. He also gave Varla the books the angel had left, which were dense and long despite being for beginners. While eating and reading, the boy realized he needed to find ways to heal himself, make antidotes, and start fires without using a blade or water, and by the same methods, he was able to get a lot of water from the water. In a world of combat, he regularly napped during the day and cycled between creating and melting ice to sharpen his magical skills. Repeating the cycle, he says he can create ice in 5 seconds, but still can't make it fly. But the water he makes always flies away. By day, Rio gathered ingredients inside the barrier and ran long distances to strengthen both his body and magic, preparing for hunting. At night, he trained his magic nonstop, creating ice and evaporating water. Every day you repeated this training in the water. A knife fastened to a stick with ice. It is the 13th day for our protagonist in Phi. Examining the magical water bubbles held in one hand. The spear turned one hand into an ice knife on a stick, and he thinks his magic has worked pretty well so far. Picking a name for his new technique, he settles on Ice Spear even though he still cannot make his ice fly, and that day he plans to find detoxifying herbs and a stone to use for a fire. Starter, determined and eager, he begins the day excited to reach his goals. Stepping beyond the barrier for the first time, he holds his spear. Plans to head southwest were false. Michael said there was a beach. Moves through the dark forest, stepping over small rocks and other obstacles. Stepping out of the dark forest, he is surprised by the beautiful scenery. He sees a lovely river stretching across his entire field of vision on a sunny day. He is amazed by the landscape's beauty when he reaches the river and decides to descend the mountain he was on. Descending the mountain, the protagonist spots something on the ground and crouches to inspect it. On closer inspection, he realizes he has found the quartz, one of his goals for the day. Our boy never expected it to be so easy to find, and now he won't have any trouble starting fires at home. He then continues walking along the riverside. He figures that if he keeps walking northeast, he'll keep his house on his left, always knowing where it is and where to run in case of danger. Continuing on, he reflects on the monsters of Fel. He thinks he might be able to defeat some of them, but can't be sure yet, and he remembers his second goal of finding detoxifying herbs, so he tries to recall any tips from the book on how to find them. Rio suddenly hears a sound behind him. He turns his head and is startled to see his smaller boar. A boar charges toward him as our frightened boy struggles to move. The boar closes in. Acting quickly and desperately, he throws himself aside to dodge the attack. Lying on the ground, he sees the boar about to charge again. Injured in the leg and still recovering, he sees the boar charge at him again. His hands touch the earth and the past. A sheet of ice forms between him and the boar, catching the boar off guard so it slips and loses control of its movements. Rio weighs an idea and decides that even though he still can't make his ice spears fly, what he already knows might be enough. Sliding toward the fallen protagonist, the boar slams into the giant ice spears. At last, the boy collapses to the ground, relieved. The impaled Borelli lay lifeless. After his life-or-death battle with the boar, Rio changes his diet and starts eating less and less of the food in the silo. He learns that monsters in this world use magic, and the stronger they are, the more powerful their magic. False Michael warned him that the more he used his magic, the better it would become, and the monsters had been using theirs for a long time. By the time you learned to subdue them all, his power had grown slowly and steadily, one step at a time. Rios cooks a huge chunk of boar meat, while a giant boar lies defeated behind him. The key difference between animals and monsters is a gem near the heart called the magic stone, which monsters have but animals lack. The boy learns that a monster's species determines whether it can use magic, and that the monsters in the Rhonda forest have wiped out the native animals. Rio still spots animals alive here and there, from carnivores like crocodiles to small, fast creatures like rabbits in any case. Many cads, carnivorous animals, still threaten humans, whether or not they can match monsters in a real fight. In this world, the monsters were so strong they sat at the top of the food chain. Adding magic to that made things much more complicated. Watching the new monster, Rio remembers the book already taught him about the creature. Known as the horned bison, the creature annihilated with ease. Giant crocodiles also use wind magic to make their charges lethal. Suddenly, something unexpected knocked the bison down. It falls from the sky and severs its head from the rest of its body. Rio walks slowly toward the defeated bison and says his new water magic, Yia Team, is pretty cool. Minnie sees something in the water eating the bison's head, and as it comes closer, he notices how fast the head is being devoured and discovers a fish similar to a piranha from Earth that was attracted by the bison's blood. Rio stuck to his water magic training as much as he could and became very good at controlling his water jets so they could pierce any object except magical shields. He even built a device he called a water saw that cut through materials by spinning a disc of water at high speed, and made ice rollers to ease manual labor and process the hides of the animals he hunted. Rio trained his body as much as his magic, because with monsters, you never know what to expect. Expect a snake's tail to rush in at high speed. When a giant kite snake appears, he remembers it uses wind magic to swing its tail like a sonic swan. Rio stares at the snake, showing no trace of fear. Effortlessly, the snake slices through the rock beside it with its sonic tail as if it were paper, having fled. Quickly, Rio steadies himself and plans his counterattack. Water bubbles surround him as the boy stares intently at the snake. Moments later, a light rain begins to fall on both Rio and the snake. He raises his hand and focuses on each droplet of water around the snake. A snake with deadly intent flies toward a boy caught in a brutal, ferocious attack. As his concentration ends, he makes a sudden motion with his hands and body, then gigantic ice spears shoot up. It struck the snake's body, defeating it instantly. Rain dissolved the giant snake's venom, and it likely could not withstand the boiling water. However, monsters at Rio's discovered cheap tricks didn't work on Lithia's assassin eagle, which used wind magic and supersonic speed to attack its targets. Our boy ran at top speed as an assassin eagle chased him. The eagle slams into the ground with a massive impact, throwing a. Our boy moves to the side. Our protagonist regains his balance and readies a close-range, high-speed attack on the assassin eagle. Rio was certain he had struck the eagle. He flew backward, dodging the strike. His instinct told him a direct hit to the eye would have defeated the beast. It was by far the strongest monster he had faced so far. Focused on defense, he thought his counterattack had saved him, but he never knew when another monster would appear during the fight. The monster book the fake Michael left him contained an incredible collection of monsters and detailed descriptions of each. Because it was a beginner's edition, he assumed there were intermediate and advanced versions, and at the end of the book were two special pages, one showing a dragon and the other an Akuma. It was a humanoid monster. The special pages were meant for people who wanted to be the best of the best, but Rio never aimed for that. Once we stopped caring about that kind of goal, and you just wanted a peaceful life, Rio completed his first full year in the new world living peacefully. Our protagonist stands on a moonlit night, facing what appears to be another humanoid being. A year had passed since Rio arrived in the new world of Fi. Above the lake in the northernmost part of the Ronda forest, the mood in the sky reaches its peak. A dull, headless warrior stood before him. The protagonist wonders what Headless Knight is doing in the Ronda forest and where he came from. The Headless Knight's real strength was his swordsmanship, and he wasn't even listed in the beginner's monster book. That meant he was either not considered a monster or was above beginner level. Dullen wasn't going to use magic to win either, but the knight was incredibly skilled with the sword. On top of that, he was arrogant, and people were saying he would start training for real whether he wanted to or not. He thinks it felt like throwing them to the ground and injuring them. After landing 3 blows that would have killed them. Anyone else might turn his back on our boy. Then he mounts his horse and rides away as if expecting things to be better next time. Our boy didn't even know if he was going to be a real man. His attacks had no effect on the knight because he couldn't land a clean hit. Each day his fighting spirit grew, but his first fight ended in an almost instant defeat. This time he was more than just a man. After an hour of fighting, Rhea moved faster and could now anticipate Meg's movements. However, when his ice sword struck Mike's blade, it shattered completely. Suddenly he found himself staring into the Headless Knight, surprise in his eyes. Then the knight attacked, sending Rio flying several meters. Lying injured on the ground, the protagonist thinks he landed at least 3 hits today. Rio rises, the Mike staying still in front of him as if waiting, then draws his sword and lays his hand on the blade, which glows brightly. The sword transforms, growing and completely reshaping its blade, and the knight hands it to our protagonist, states the course, and rides off again. Left with his new sword, our boy kneels, holding the sword in his new hand, thinking it was a gift led from a master to a disciple. Realizing his new weapon meant he had to train you harder, and after battling the assassin eagle, he knew he had to become stronger. He exercised 30 minutes each morning to build his muscles. Running at the limits of his magic, he practiced sword fighting against the Headless Knight. In sword training, the right hand guides the blade, while the left hand provides support. Each strike in training improves his strength and speed. It proved true, and the second encounter with the assassin eagle did not come alone but brought its partner. In the first fight, the eagle lost an eye by engaging at close range. This time, it would make the same mistake. During the battle, our boy grew tired from running and dodging both eagle's attacks, but he'd already expected it. By using his magic in different ways, he avoided the eagle's second surprise attack. The attack faltered when the one-eyed assassin eagle did not expect its companion to be killed so quickly, so it pulled back and hesitated. Leo believes the eagle was the first opponent to bring him close to death twice, and he had already prepared himself for death on other occasions. The one-eyed eagle made him feel something different. In any case, this was the third and final time they met. The evil standing before him looked completely different from their last 2 encounters. Our boy saw it was far darker and larger than before, surrounded by a black aura. An eagle lunged at her newest body in Rio, and she barely had time to dodge. Lying on the ground, he remembered it had used the same move in their first fight. Hit by the evil's blow, he knew it was the same beast but now evolved. The fight raged on as our boy struggled to defend himself and saw how much stronger the eagle had become. Meanwhile, the evil shattered Ryo's ice armor into pieces while he tried to repair it. Suddenly, he could no longer use his magic. The eagle launched another charge at him, and he barely made it. After dodging the attack, he was growing exhausted and wondered if the evil was somehow disabling his magic. The evil screeches and unleashes a lightning spell that sweeps across the wide area in front of Rio, dodging the eagles down by 2. After he loses his spear, the eagle, spotting an opening, prepares to launch another attack on our boy. Rio draws his new sword and thinks you can channel magic through it. At their final moment of fear, after 6 changes, their eyes meet again. Rio swiftly and effectively pierces the eagle's throat as it weakens. Rio looks into the eagle's steady eye and says he understands it. How it lost its partner and its eye, kept giving its all and was defeated. He keeps saying their encounter at least helped him grow and become stronger, and he is grateful for that. He never said she was truly brave for showing how much she'd changed, and that you will have the honor of delivering the final blow. He drew his sword. The monster's fate was sealed by what came from its throat. The next day Rio went back to the battlefield where he'd fought the one-eyed assassin eagle. Standing among the remnants of the battle, he finally felt the victory was real. He felt no pride in it, as our boys stood there something descended before him, and he could think of nothing else. They were there, and a massive vehicle landed in front of him. The dragon stood still in front of our hero and communicated telepathically, wondering if this was how telepathic contact with humans worked. It kept saying it had not contacted a human in a long time and asked if the human was coherent. Still frightened, Rio starts hearing the drive's voice in his mind. The dragon seems pleased that our boy can hear it and says it is the dragon standing before him. He wonders if this is telepathy and apologizes, saying he was in shock but can hear it now. The beast then asks if he has seen a bird that evolved from an assassin eagle in the area. The man thought he knew that bird all too well, and the protagonist immediately apologizes in case the bird was one of the dragon's accolades, and the beast then asked if it had killed her, while the dragon said she was not his accolade, and he was very curious because the bird's aura had vanished from the region. He thinks it likely that one of the other dragons ate the bird, so he went down the mountain to check. Still a little afraid, the protagonist says yes, he was the one who killed the assassin called Eagle. Surprised, the beast says it's fine, because he's satisfied that the bird has disappeared. He explains that this bird was the first in centuries to evolve in the forest, and asks whether she had been suppressing the boy's magic. Rio replied quickly that she had, and he said he could hardly believe he couldn't use his magic, and felt his rights as a mage had been violated. The dragon notices something in Rio, and says it looks like he's carrying something strange. Then he recognizes the sword as the Fairy King's, but Rio says he got it from a headless knight at the northern lake. The beast confirms this, saying the knight is the Water Fairy King who lives in that forest, while Rio says he is a water mage and that the sword saved him the day before. The dragon says that is why the king liked him, and that he is getting magic lessons from the king, and the boy quickly replies that he is not taking magic lessons from the Water Fairy King. He says he's training in swordsmanship with the king and has never seen him use magic, and the dragon finds it odd that he's taking up swordplay and says, "It's water magic from the king, and if the king is doing this, it must mean the boy needs it." He adds that the Water Fairy King probably likes the boy because he likes him. Lured for thousands and thousands of years, Rio sees an opening and asks the dragon if he may ask a few questions, and the dragon immediately agrees, so the boy begins by saying he wants to know more about the Rondo Forest, such as its size and what kind of place it is. The Rondo Forest is as large as a small continent, formerly called the Rondisov continent, and the driving also says the small continent is surrounded by water except to the north. A mountain range surrounds it. The dragon then says that as far as he knows, Rio is the only human in the Rondo of the subcontinent. Rio is shocked. He had asked for a peaceful, isolated life, but not this isolated. Surprised, the beast says it can't be possible that he's lived his whole life like that and asks where the boys are from. Without hesitation, Rio says he was reincarnated. Realizing he came from another world and that others have arrived here like him, he suddenly hears the roar of war. The roar shakes the air and startles both the dragon and the boy. The dragon closes his eyes and keeps listening while Rio stands frozen like a statue. The dragon then starts to leave, saying that they are being summoned, but they will surely call for me again. Desperate, Rio asks for the dragon's name while giving his own. Lewin introduces himself and warns the boy not to go to the eastern mountains because dragons there may attack at will. The dragon blasts off at a terrifying speed and easily breaks the sound barrier. Our hero watches it all as the dragon keeps flying away at supersonic speed. Overwhelmed, our boy says dragons are incredibly powerful as the dust settles around him. Sometime later, Lewin finally arrives at the place where he was seen. Summoned, he finds Rio peculiar and suspects he may not be truly human, possibly an evolved or mutated member of the species. Remembering the boy's story, the dragon says he has never seen anything like it, finds it fascinating, admits that even after a long life there are things he still does not know, and looks forward to watching the boy more. Real now, he watched himself in a water mirror. He notices he is only 1 day old. From time to time, the boy's hair grows a lot. Instead, he cuts it the same way he cuts his nails, which grow now and then. After every bath, he notices it is not his height that changes but his face, and he decides to go look for fish today. Assault, after that, he drowns his thoughts in the warm water of his morning bath. Arriving at the beach, Rio notices pieces of wood were scattered across the sand. Appearing to notice something in the sand, he runs toward him. As he moves closer, he suspects a shipwreck and sees only 3 people on the sand. After checking the first man's condition, he confirms the man has been dead for some time, with a figure in the distance. Seeing the other man with a piece of wood through his body, he realizes there is nothing he can do for him either. Then he sees a third man in armor lying on the nearby sand. Rio walks over and sees the man's right arm mangled and bleeding heavily, and when she examines the wound more closely, she thinks an artery may have been hit because the blood loss is massive. Rio, thank you. Realizing that leaving him would let the man bleed to death, Rio knows he must at least try to help. Looking directly at the wound, he concentrates and searches for a way to use his water magic. Remembering the human body is about 60% water, he realizes his water mage powers should let him manipulate it. He focuses fully, finds the source of the bleeding, and works to stop it. After a struggle, he gathers water to wet the man's wound and stops the police. At first, the man's wound seemed to gush blood, and as the bleeding began to stop, Rio finally felt proud that he had somehow managed to help. Lifting the armored man from the hot sand, he carries him in his arms. Soon after, he finds a cart among the wreckage and puts the man inside to make him easier to carry. Later, the man wakes up startled in an unfamiliar place. Standing up, he finds himself in a house and in a very long. It's a large one at that, and someone wonders if it might be the mayor's house. In the village, nothing spoken to his right grabs his attention, and he notices his sword and armor propped against the wall beside him. The man leaves the house, sees Real holding firewood, and immediately introduces himself. Pulling himself together, he asks if Rio was the one who saved him. After work, he thanks the boy for saving his life. Our hero says it was. He did nothing and only carried Abel back to his house after finding him on the beach. Inense says he could only save one of the 3 men on the sand, and Abel says it's okay because they were smugglers. Rio stops what he's doing and turns to Abel, asking whether they were really smugglers. Our hero figures Abel must be a smuggler since they were together, but doubts it because the man doesn't seem like a bad person. And still thoughtful, the boy notices they're talking without any trouble, so he keeps thinking Abel probably isn't speaking Japanese, and that the fake Michael did a good job helping them understand each other. A smile spreads across his face as he reintroduces himself to Abel and asks if Abel wants to eat. He should eat because he must be starving. Still in shock, Abel hears her heroes say he hung up his clothes and that they should be driving. By now, back on the beach with Abel, Rio shows him where the 2 other men had been, and as they speculate about where the bodies ended up, Rio tells Abel how lucky he was, while Abel asks the boy not to speak so formally. Our boy tells Abel he usually speaks formally with older people while the man prefers a relaxed, friendly tone, and in a short silence our boy thinks he may have made his first friend in Phi. Abel wonders whether the ship's cargo sank or simply vanished, and the man keeps thinking everything from the ship is inside the Kraken's stomach. He admits there's nothing he can do about it now. It thanks our hero, but says what he's looking for is no longer anywhere on the shore. He then says he needs to get to Louvre to send a message to his friends. Real. Then the video says it does not know the city, only that it must be to the north, and that Abel will have to travel a long distance to reach it. Hero explains there are no cities or people nearby, and the man says he'll have to make the journey either way. The man turns to Rio and asks if Rio would like to go with him. After a few seconds with no response, the man waves his hand in front of Rio's eyes to get his attention. Later in our boy's cabin, the man apologizes, his voice trailing off. It comes off abrupt and says it would be like a job or that Rio would be like a guy. He says he'd even pay Rio and help him if Rio wanted to try city life. The sweating man then asked our boy what he thinks. Our hero accepts the proposal, but says he can only leave the next morning because he still has things to take care of. Abel is happy and thanks our boy for going with him. After washing the dinner dishes, Rio tells the man he is going out and will be back soon. What happened? Stepping out of the cabin, he says Asperity is leaving so late and that he needs to tell someone he'll be away and ask Abel to wait because it might take a while. After the man replies, the headless mate appears on his course, waiting for our hero. Facing him, our boy says he will leave the forest tomorrow, and that tonight's training will be the last until he returns from his adventure. The night waits, unfolding in real time. You lift the sword he gave you and point it at the warrior. Our hero braces and tells the knight this training must not be like the others, demanding the knight attack with everything he has. Meanwhile, by candlelight, Abel wonders who Rio said he'd tell. No one else lies in the area. He assumes Rio is alone now, but maybe Rio was with someone and went to visit their grave, which he did not intend to pry into. Even though Rio does not know where the Sea of Loon is, he said it is far to the north and wonders why he said that. He realizes it would be very hard to go alone, since he doesn't even know how large the forest is. He says Rio is a mage without a staff, probably bad at fighting, and he'll help him with clothes and other basics when they reach the city. Tired and sweaty, our hero stands with a sword buried in the ground, panting from the training of the headless mate. He notices a movement in the night ahead of him. The warrior then holds out an object to Rio, who wonders what it is. A noble, headless figure stands proudly before our hero and does not answer his question. Afterward, Abel says he does not want to seem rude to our boy and that the boy does not have to answer if he prefers not to. The man asked where Rio went last night, and Rio explained he had gone to tell his master he would be away on an adventure while putting on his new hooded cloak. The man told Abel it was like a farewell gift, asked if it had any special effects, and Rio said he did not know. They head toward the flowers and finally set off on their journey, glancing back. Back at his cabin, our hero quietly says goodbye to the place, a nostalgic look in his eyes. That morning they crossed the land and headed north without seeing any monsters. In the news, something happened. A small boar appeared in their path and also quacked. He drew his sword quickly and charged at the creature. One precise strike from the warrior impaled the small boar and ended the fight in seconds. Our hero stared at the other with wide eyes. Noticing doubt in the warrior's eyes, Real explains that parts of Abel's body glow when he uses a combat skill and that his movements change while he uses it. The warrior explains it's normal for those to be combat skills restricted to warriors who use weapons, and says they should focus on finding a good place to camp as Meg approaches. You also mentioned they pass a large tree with a hole in the middle that would make a good campsite, and it could also eat the boar. Inside the camp's treehouse, Abel says he'll rest first and tells our hero not to hesitate to wake him if anything happens. The warrior lies down to rest while Rio sits at the camp, deep in thought. With time on his hands, he practices controlling his magic, while our heroes watch as the night grows deeper and calmer with each passing hour. After a few hours, Abel wakes and tells her hero to rest while he takes over the watch. The man watching the rabbit our hero had hunted. It's not limited. Examining Ryo's catchy questions and methods shows they are very valid and effective. Seeing Rito lying down, he is certain the cloak wasn't made by humans and wonders what kind of mentor he has. Abel believed the boy's master was a spirit, but spirits do not give gifts like cloaks, but it looked like a dragon, and its cloak was not made by humans, so the boy's master could still be a spirit. Abel shivers in the cold and thinks it cannot be them again. Seconds later, our hero wakes and greets the warrior with a good morning. Our heroes press on with their journey. They move toward their goal as Abel walks ahead with his sword drawn and Rio follows, watching the vegetation. Something suddenly falls from the sky to the warrior's right, startling both of them. Abel draws his sword and thinks it could be something invisible or an enemy using an enemy. Visibility is poor. Looking up, they see a deadly evil. Our hero warns the warrior that the beast uses air magic to attack from a distance. The warriors urge retreat, but Rio warns that a boar is chasing them and unknown beasts lie ahead, so escape is not an option. Some think they've walked into a trap, but our hero says it's just a coincidence. The killer eagle uses the open field to hunt, and the group wonders what to do now. Rio says they should fight in the clearing, and he'll handle the killer eagle while the other animals take on the boar. Abel, the worried boy, warns that the eagle's aerial assault and charging attack can kill even a warrior like him if he is not careful. Archero says defense is his specialty as an ice mage and assumes warriors struggle to deal with flying targets. The warrior says that's fine, steps forward and prepares for combat, and while running he tells Rio he'll return as soon as he deals with the boar and warns him not to die, and our hero tells Abel to keep a cool head or he'll get hurt. Then the warrior runs toward the boar, puzzled that Rio could detect the monster from so far away. The boar then manipulates the surrounding rocks to launch a magical stone attack, raining a barrage down on our warrior. As he gets close, he brings his sword down toward the boar. He draws his sword from the fallen boar's body. Dropping to his knees, he plants his sword in the ground and gasps for breath. Meanwhile, he realizes he used too many abilities too quickly in the fight, and that a T has finally caught up to him. He must recover quickly because Rio needs his help. Lifts the fallen boar's body and carries it back to our hero, who waits with a killer eagle. Returning to the spot where he left our hero, he finds the killer eagle lying on the ground with our hero smiling beside the defeated beast, and the warrior, stunned, asks Rio whether he really defeated it, and Rio smiles, confirms he did, and adds that the monster's head had also withdrawn. Abel drops to his knees, stunned, when the boy asks if he is hurt. At the scene of the battle, Rio says he is unhurt and fine. He says he's only a little tired. Immediately, Abel asks how Rio managed to dodge the killer. He warns that invisible air magic attacks are extremely hard to dodge by sight alone, and Rio asks him to turn and face him. Curious, Abel turns to face our hero. The warrior then notices a thin wall of ice and reaches out to touch it. Rio says the barrier is hard to notice, and the warrior agrees it is nearly invisible. Abel realizes the killer eagle practically defeated itself by charging into an almost invisible wall of ice. The warrior says he knows many air, fire, and earth mages, but an old man once told him water mages do not really fight, and he will be proven wrong. Smiling, our protagonist asks Abel what he meant. Abel quickly replies it is nothing, and that he was just talking to himself. Both look up at the mountain and hear frightening sounds. They must go left or right to find a way out of the mountains. The warrior says he has a bad feeling about both routes. Abel pulls out a coin and suggests leaving the decision to chance. Heads they go left, tails they go right. A hero might think the warrior already flipped the coin into the air, and it lands heads up in the warrior's hand, so they take the left path. Abel notices something odd about Ryo's behavior and asks whether the coin is wrong. Ryo says he has never seen money before, then asks to examine it, and the warrior promptly agrees. Abel explains how the coin economy works in this world, and Rio compares it to 19th century Earth. When asked how many nations exist, Abel replies from memory that there are 3 major realms: the Kingdom of Mately, the Empire of WWE, and the Federation of Handel U. Speaking, the warrior again senses something strange around them. Inen says they're in a stone golem's nest, and Rio says he didn't even know golems had nests in their heads. The warrior explains that a nest is a place where many golems appear, and says he really wonders why they lack human-like limbs, and after counting, he reports there are 12 of them and that running is not a good option. At that moment, the boy asks Abel if he can test a new magic attack, and the warrior agrees. He reaches out and focuses on his new spell. 10 thick walls of ice suddenly crash down on every golem in the area, sounding like an earthquake. Grinning, our hero jokes that this is what you'd call a weapon of mass destruction. They clear the area and uncover an almost large, dark yellow magic stone, then explain that a stone's value depends on its size and color. Ryo says it's nice to have battle spoils and tells Abel he can keep the magic stone. The warrior, slightly incredulous, agrees and says he'll hold on to the prize. Meanwhile, Ryo realizes the method he used to defeat the monsters didn't work as intended. The warrior says they might be dead without Rio, and that they didn't even know how to harvest magic stones, which Rio agrees with. After a while, our hero spots something to his right and asks Abel what it is. When Rio says it looks like a giant hippopotamus, the warrior calls it a behemoth, and our hero jokingly asks if he wants to hunt it. Our boy does the math and decides the behemoth is far too large even for his 10 ice walls. Abel confirms that and warns him not to try anything against it, and Rio turns serious and asks the warrior if he thinks Rio is crazy, and the warrior immediately says yes. Our heroes notice something in the distance. One of them spots something flying toward them and thinks it might be dragons. As they get closer, they see the creatures are wyverns, not dragons. They both quickly realize the wyverns aren't coming for them. They're heading for the behemoth, and Rio gets excited, saying he'll finally get to witness a beast battle. Pointing out the behemoth is clearly outnumbered, he says 6 wyverns are about to attack it. One of the flying beasts screeches and sends a sharp gust of wind at the behemoth. Reeling from the winged monster's attack, the heroes worry about what the behemoth will do. Then the behemoth stands motionless and uses stone magic to see. Massive boulders form a shield around it. The wyverns attack heads for one of the rocks, the creatures summoned as a barrier. Wind attacks from the flying monsters crash into the stones the behemoth summoned, fully shielding it from damage. Launch another quick wave of wind attacks at the creature. The behemoth then summons enormous stone walls around itself for protection, leaving both our heroes and the wyverns stunned at the towering walls around the giant beast. Abel says he knew about behemoths but didn't realize they could use magic, while our hero is expecting a battle, not a magical one. Wave monsters hover patiently, circling the stone walls the land beast summoned around itself. With a terrible roar, the the behemoth shatters those walls and stares directly at the weavers. All at once, the flying monsters and our heroes realize something strange is happening. The wyverns lose their ability to fly and fall to the ground around the beach. Abel asks Ryo whether the monster somehow paralyzed the wyverns from every direction, and Ryo says he strongly doubts that. The behemoth roars again, scaring everyone and shaking the ground, and as people ride there, Ryo thinks he has seen this before. Then a boy says it's probably magic nullification, and Abel, shocked, says he cannot believe it because he has never seen a human cower like that, much less a monster. Ryo tells him to look closer. Our boy points out the winged monsters are trying to get up but can't, and if they were paralyzed, they wouldn't be able to move at all. Abel can hardly believe his eyes, but he pauses and says he's heard of traps like this in dungeons, and Ryo gets very excited when he hears the word dungeons. He asks whether the dungeons in the kingdom of Mately have anti-magic rooms, and the warrior says no. The dungeons are in the western province, not in the kingdom. As the behemoth tramples and the wyverns move on the ground, a warrior asks our hero if he is interested in the dungeon. He answers yes promptly. As the beast finishes off the wyverns, Abel tells Ryo he's lucky because Loon has the only dungeon in the central provinces. The boy says the warrior should have told him sooner, but the warrior replies that he didn't know much about real dungeons. They continued walking away, talking about how terrifying that battle had been and wondering what a fight between the Abel and the behemoth would be like. Next, they watch a wyvern eat a boar. They prepare their trap. Ryo raises his arms and focuses on. Like magic, suddenly massive ice spikes fall from the. All of them strike the monster from the sky, pinning it to the ground while the warrior moves quickly. During the conversation, the boy says they should hunt because their food is running low, and then a small ice arrow strikes a rabbit and pins it to the mountainside. They also begin ambushing other wyverns scattered around the enemy. In the area, after defeating another beast, Ryo says hunting them is getting easy, and Abel admits he is still surprised at how easy it has been. The hero slices the meat and says he just needs to finish drying it before they can continue their journey. The boy says they might get through that path while they can, and someone concerned tells him not to let his guard down. When Abel finishes speaking, they both look to their left and see a huge beast that looks like a griffin on a stairway. It stares at them. Both know the creature is fixed on the wall. Real rabbit meat is tied around his waist. He grabs one and tosses it to the beast. The creature happily devours it, as Ryo says it looks starving, while the griffin remains cheerful and bouncy, and our hero tells Abel to feed it too. The warrior pulls a rabbit from his belt and tosses it to the beast, which flies off after grabbing the food. Moses spots a road behind the beast and points it out to Abel. The warrior sees the signposts, tells Ryo it's definitely a path, and Ryo calls him over to follow the trail. South of the central provinces, the Yule Mountains form an impassable range that even adventurers cannot cross, and long ago the path had a different name, but no one remains who remembers it. They're no longer members, and the place is now called the Evil Mountains, because it's infested with orcs and ogres. Abel breathes a sigh of relief that they survived the Evil Mountains on their way to civilization, and Ryo asks whether the warrior is a rank B adventurer, and the warrior confirms it. Answering the question, our hero says he's unsure about the benefits of registering with an adventurers. He explains the guild card is an ID that lets you enter any city for free and get better market prices. Ryo says that's exactly what he needed to hear. Abel adds the guild also stores adventurers' belongings and profits, and he finishes by saying it would be far too dangerous for adventurers to wander around carrying all their wealth in their pockets. Amaze believes guilds function like banks. Now standing in the middle of a city surrounded by tall buildings, he studies a pamphlet while holding a pouch. Does Hero remember the questions he asked Abel along the way, like whether he could withdraw money from other guild branches at any time? Abel says his knowledge is limited to the central provinces, and he adds that when nations go to war, they can hire the guild and adventurers as mercenaries. Ryo thinks it's cheaper than sending mints into battle, but the warrior says adventurers can accept or decline this kind of commission. Abel says he fears an enemy could seize everything he owns, and he would have no choice but to fight, and Ryo reacts angrily, demanding to know why they let their money be held hostage and why the governments permit it. Pointing, he says you can see a city in the distance. Abel says he's almost certain it's Kaladi, which means they've reached the kingdom of Nightly. He adds that Kaladi is the southeasternmost city in the world. He says they will leave the kingdom, and that if they walk northeast for a day, they will reach Loon, the Reach's final destination. He also suggests that if Ryo wants to register as an adventurer, he should do it in Loon and non-Kaladesh. That makes our hero ask why. The warrior says Loon is the kingdom's largest border city and draws all kinds of people, because it's the only city in the region with a dungeon. Abel says making Loon Ryo's home base will help him feel more settled since cities give local adventurers more privileges. Rao agrees, but says he still won't have a card to show when they arrive in Kaladi, and Abel says that's not a problem because he's a B-ranked adventurer who can sponsor him. Mentioning a Rio, he says the fee is only 1 silver coin. Our boy adds that the warrior should know he has always had a lot of respect for him as the warrior visibly moves forward. That's fine, they'll spend 1 night in Kailati, and Rio needs to try a local dish. Next, Rio is at a restaurant trying what looks like curry with rice, amazed by the flavor. One after another, he orders more curry. He kept eating plate after plate, stuffing himself all night. As they walked through the city, Rio asked Abel if Curry and Loon were there too, and the warrior assured him they were very common in the southern part of the kingdom. The hero vows to try to recreate the curry when he returns home to the forest of Rondo. The next day, walking through the city is brought to you by them. The boy asks if people live outside the city too, and Apple says farmers usually do now, but used to live inside the city, adding that this is why Loon does not close its gates at night, while Rio worries about safety because Loon seems to have many more patrols in Kaladi. Abel says Loon keeps the peace well because of its history and size. Arriving at the gates of Loon, the guard greets Abel by name and says his companion must pay the fee. Abel says he'll handle it and rummages through his pouch for the right amount. Abel suggests they go straight to the guild to ask whether Rio really wants to register, and our hero agrees, saying he wants to try life as an adventurer. The warrior says that since Rio is with him, Rio can apply for a rank up, and explains that adventurers usually start at rank F but can move up to E or D. If accompanied by someone of rank B or higher, our hero asks about the benefits of being ranked doctor, and is told he would make more money from better missions and rewards. Rio then asks the warrior if wyvern magic stones are valuable, which the warrior says they are because those beasts are hard to defeat, adding they are almost priceless since they rarely show up on the market, and selling all of Rio's would crash it. Outside the Adventurers Guild, the warrior says the guild can handle it, so he doesn't need to interfere. No need to worry. As soon as they enter the guild, a young woman asks if Abel is real. A man says he's surprised to see Abel in person, and many people are watching this video. The large warrior behind the girl is stunned to see Abel alive, and the narrator explains that B-rank adventurers are rare and that Abel leads the Crimson Sword group. Abel's group included Rhea the Priestess, Warren the Shield Bearer, and Lynn the Mage. Our hero then thinks that being friends with Abel would pay off since everyone likes him. Ebelden puts his hands on Ryo's shoulders and introduces him to everyone as the man who saved his life, the one who made it possible for him to get there alive. Maxki says Ryo is going to register as an adventurer, and after that will be one of. He asks the group to be kind to the new member, and they all give our hero broad smiles. Rio introduces himself and says he is glad to meet everyone. A man thanks our hero for saving Abel's life, and another says he hopes to get to know him better too. Abel asked Man if she could handle Rio's paperwork, because he intends to recommend Rio for a D-rank adventure. She says she can handle everything, but he'll need something to prove he's worthy of being a D-rank adventurer. Abel had already expected that and asks if it is possible to meet the guild master now, telling her not to say she believes it is, and as they walk the girl says the master has been in his office all day doing paperwork and is not in a bad mood, and that she will tell him they are here and ask them to wait in the lounge. Abel settles onto the sofa while Rio stands and waits to be called. Suddenly the hero's voice rang out, asking what they were saying as heavy footsteps approached. A man enters the lounge and kneels when he sees Abel, who is clearly overwhelmed with relief. Abel says he's sorry for worrying the guildmaster and that he's alive. The guildmaster says he lost the will to live when he heard Abel had gone missing. Calming himself, the master asks where the mage is. Abel points to Ryo and says Ryo saved his life. The man introduces himself as Huma Glass, the guild master of Loon, and thanks Ryo for saving Abel. Ryo says it's no problem and that he just happened to cross paths with the warrior by chance. Then the warrior tells the guild master that our hero wants to register with the Loon Guild and asks to recommend him for a rank increase, and the master says he will require proof that the warrior really intends to recommend him. Naina replies that that's exactly what Abel came to discuss with the guild master, then excuses herself and says if they meet her she'll be at the front desk. After she closes the door, the guild master moves to an armchair in the lounge, and once seated he says he needs to know a few things first. Abel steps forward and says Ryo is stronger than he is, and our hero challenges him for saying that. The guild master is clearly impressed. The warrior keeps treating our heroes like clowns, but stays serious about his work, and displays the spoils from the monsters they defeated along the way. Apple spreads the magic stones across the table and shows everyone their size and color. Surprised, the guildmaster says their green color marks them as air attribute magic stones, but leaves part unsaid. He then adds that they are not only huge but dark in color, and asks whether they came from wyverns, and Abel confirms that Rio has just as many as he does. Still in disbelief, the guildmaster asks where they found so many wyverns and warns that if they had been near the city, they would have to recruit every living soul to stop such an attack. But the warrior reassures him that they hunted them south of the evil mountains, and the master asks how they ended up there in the first place the way. The warrior explains that their ship was destroyed, leaving them on a large stretch of land where they headed for the mountains and found a wyvern nest. The guildmaster asks if Abel plans to use his contacts to sell the stones without destabilizing the market, and he sheepishly agrees. Hugh says he can sell to a wide range of buyers, including members of the royal family, and can get them the money in 2 or 3 days. He asks if they should split the profits 50-50, but Abel says no and insists on 40% for himself and 60% for Rio. Rio objects and says it should be 50-50, but the warrior insists he must repay the hero for saving his life and bringing him back safely. He was about to protest again when the guild master warned him not to even think about tarnishing Abel's honor by refusing the split, so he finally gave in and accepted 60% for himself and 40% for Abel. At the reception desk, Naina tells someone to wait, but they are not listening. In the hallway, the receptionist shouts for someone to stop because things aren't settled yet. Then Rio notices something strange just outside the hall door. A girl opens the door and is stunned. Her legs give out and she begins to cry when she sees Abel alive. Smiling, the warrior apologizes to Lin for causing her to worry. As a priestess and a tall warrior enter the room, Abel says he's back, and the priestess, eyes filled with emotion, welcomes him back. Standing, the guildmaster says they have a lot to discuss and tells Nine and Rio the paperwork is in his office. In the office, he tells our hero to sit and asks the man with the relevant papers to register Rio as a D-rank adventurer. Real and a bit shy, he asks the master if it's really okay for him to be ranked E, and the man reassures him that it is. Someone then asked our hero, who still wasn't convinced by the number of magic stones they brought back, and Rio felt embarrassed because Abel dealt the final blows. He knows the warrior is skilled, but also knows that no matter how talented a warrior is, one person could not take down a wyvern, so our hero was strong enough to create the chance for others to finish off the beasts. Anicaps' hero is clearly good enough to rank as a D-rank adventure. The guild master gives Rio a light, friendly punch and looks quite surprised. He notes Rio was surprisingly athletic for a mage. Our hero says he used to hunt alone and trained his body so he would not be helpless if his magic failed in the middle of a fight or he had to run. The guild master says he fully understands what he means and wishes more young people thought that way today. As soon as someone knocks on the guild master's office door, he invites them in. Naina arrives at the office holding something like a crystal ball and says she brought the registration tool. Hugh thanks her, says he'll leave the paperwork to her, and tells the hero to follow whatever instructions Naina gives so everything goes smoothly. Nina takes the chance to formally introduce herself to Rio, telling him she works at the Adventurers Guild of Loon. Our hero says it's a pleasure to meet her and thanks her for the hospitality. Sitting across from him, Nina says she needs to establish some basic facts and asks him to answer a few questions. She asks his name, occupation, and a detail about his job, and Rio answers the first 2 correctly, but gets the last one wrong when she asks where he lives. Embarrassed, he admits he has no place to live yet because he just arrived in the city. She explains he can stay in the guild dormitory for up to 300 days after registering, which should give him plenty of time to settle in. She also says the Dorans help new ventures get to know each other, and that he can leave at any time during those 300 days. And as he takes the paper handed to him, Rio thinks Faye is still mysterious since there are no printers yet, but the number and quality of the copies are impressive. 9 of them ask if our hero has ever entered a dungeon, and he says he has not yet, and she adds the guild runs a monthly seminar on dungeons. There are also free courses and seminars for beginner adventurers. Manus recommends the dungeon seminar, and Rio, excited, says he wants to attend. Smiling at Rio's enthusiasm, Manus says the seminar begins the day after tomorrow. She explains it runs 5 days with a different topic each day and recommends he attend all of them. Finally, she says she will fill out the form for him and tells him to be on the 3rd floor of the guild hall at 9 in the morning the day after tomorrow. Rio then wonders whether they measure time the same way in 5 as on Earth. Manate then tells him he can check the time on the tower or the plaza and explains the tower rings at set times, including 9 in the morning. The hero confirms time is measured the same as on Earth. The girl says the interview is complete and he only needs to register, and Rio asks what she means by that. 9 of them pointed to the crystal ball she brought, and she asked her hero to place his hand over it. The boy places his hand on the ball, and a voice says he has been registered. Smiling, 90 tells him he may remove his hand from the crystal ball and thanks him. Shortly after, she hands the boy his guild ID card and tells him that if it gets damaged or destroyed, it will cost 1 gold coin to replace it. While thanking her, our hero reads the card and wonders whether he can collect points with it. A few minutes later, the party involves adventure walks into the guild master's office, all of them smiling. He thanks Hugh for letting them use the lounge to talk and says they're heading out. Lin then says they'll have a party at 6 p.m. at the Golden Wave to celebrate Abel's safe return and hopes Nana and Hugh will be there. Abel turns to our hero and says our hero must go because he is the guest of honor. Still confused, Rios turns and looks at the group. Warrior says the Golden Wave is the inn they usually stay at, and he'll book a room for Rio so he can drink as much as he wants. Abel finishes by saying Rio has no choice and cannot refuse the invitation. A voice announces the registration is complete and asks if our hero has any questions. The excited warrior offers to answer any question Rio has and tells them to head out. The priestess says she'll head to the industried gang with everything ready, while Abel accuses Hugh of stealing Rio from him, and our hero then turns and thanks Nana and the guildmaster for all their help. Nina announces he's now officially a loon adventurer and tells him she'll return to the reception desk as he thanks her. Once everyone leaves, the guildmaster kneels and says he is so happy he could cry. He then recounts how messy things got when they discovered a bowl was missing and gives thanks that he came back alive. I still can't believe the warrior ended up past the evil mountains because of a shipwreck and now thinks we've treated them terribly. He decides the warrior will stop investigating the smuggling ring and will not be sent on any jobs involving water or the sea. Grateful to Rio for bringing Abel back alive and unsure what he would have done if Abel had not returned, he moves to a cabinet of books and decides he should tell someone the warrior is safe. Walking to the shelf, he picks up a device that looks like a telephone. As Rio and Abel walk through the streets of Loon, the warrior promises to give the reward for saving him and to buy the hero new clothes and a staff, saying he knows the hero is attached to his leather clothes and sandals and will choose items that stay close to his usual style. Our hero replies that Abel doesn't need to be so cautious because he knows it's inappropriate to walk through the city wearing only a leather loincloth. Not attached to those clothes, he says he wore whatever he could find in the forest, so he'll be happy to wear anything the warrior gives him. The warrior breathes a sigh of relief and tells Rio he can pick out some casual clothes and a few more elegant ones. As they continue walking, our hero asks Abel why anyone would need a staff. While they pick out clothes, he doubts a mage really needs a staff, and Rio calls from the fitting room to say he can use magic without one. Abel says he's heard magic staffs boost power and wonders how his real abilities would change if he used one, while the hero, still getting dressed, says he's never used one and would rely on his sword for close combat if needed. Surprised, the warrior questions whether he actually knows how to use a sword or is only referring to the knife he carries, not a real sword. Rio thinks this was already discussed with Abel. He remembers the conversation where, as a wind mage, he said he would charge in to attack enemies, a claim he would not have made if he did not use a sword. As they leave the shop, the warrior asks again whether the boy truly does not want a staff, and the boy replies he does not need one. Rio adds he wouldn't even know how to use, and he already has his sword. Abel agrees but says he doesn't really have a proper sword. Our hero looks confused. Holding up his blade, he insists it is his sword. The warrior says it hardly counts as a sword because he always assumed it was a dagger. Rio says that misses the point. The real problem is he doesn't even know the basics of the world. Warrior wonders why he said that, and our hero admits he doesn't know basic things like units of measurement. Link of the day, Abel says he always thought Rio was odd, but Abel never realized Rio had almost no basic knowledge of everyday life. Our hero says the phrase knowing you know nothing to show that admitting ignorance is a sign of wisdom, and in Rio's case he truly knows nothing. The warrior explains the basics of the world and tells Abel not to memorize everything at once, but Abel remembers it all and then wonders whether, on top of everything else, the kid might be a genius. He suggests they leave that thought behind since they've just arrived at the famous Golden Wave Tavern in Warren's Rio and are ready to drink. At dawn, the lunar hero wakes up the morning after the previous mate's trip. After drinking, he thinks he's hungover because his head is pounding. Last night, his students carried him, immobile, to the room. That plus the hangover explains the state he was in on the mic earlier. Then the tavern scenes show people raising mugs and cheering in return for Abel's triumph. They drink and laugh, praising how delicious it is and how perfectly it hit. Descending the stairs, he remembered the old poem he'd wanted. Having heard about tall grass surviving through the dreams of great warriors, he sits in the tavern's common room and lowers his head, still feeling hungover. Greeting our hero, a lady walks by, wishes him good morning, and tells him breakfast will be served soon and he can sit wherever he likes. Rio thanks the woman and walks over to ask about last night's bill since he's moving into the guild lodging, and she tells him not to worry because she already paid for everything. Prize Rio notices how kind the warrior is after all. Anyone who pays for others is already better than most. Soon he goes to the Adventurers Guild headquarters. He tells Nuna he'd like to follow up on yesterday's offer. Nuna greets him good morning and asks how she can help as he says he wants to know more about the guild's logic. Nine explains there are 30 people staying there now, but they're scattered through the dungeon and not everyone comes every day, so we'll still see people around. She explains each room holds 6 people and the common area is open to everyone, and because no one else is in line, she offers to show him around. Walking together, she says she hopes he enjoyed the party and that everyone left happy, though Real feels he drank too much, and Nine suggests he stop by the guild shop for a detox potion for his hangover, and he admits he doesn't know about potions. He agrees to do that and then asks about the lodging rules, requesting an explanation. He can come and go as he pleases and has access to rooms, shared bathrooms, and a hall with a kitchen. She adds that there are no caretakers among the residents and that everyone is responsible for themselves. Impressed, Rio asked if there had ever been caretakers, and someone answered that there had, but it was a long story. The only service outsourced now is cleaning. She didn't. Someone says a former adventurer runs a cleaning business in the city, and Real says that's what adventurers do when they retire. Max 9 tells him he'll be sharing room 10 with Nils and Edo, who are not here because they went to the dungeon together. Arriving at room 109, she points to the door where the nameplates hang and says she'll put his up now since it's ready, and Real, a bit shy, agrees as the receptionist hangs his nameplate next to the door. 3 nameplates hang showing the room members' names, leaving space for 2 more. Knocking comes from the door downstairs. After permission is given to enter, Nana looks outside and says both of them are there. Leaving the room with our hero, she introduces herself as the guild receptionist. Smiling, she adds that Nils and Ito are home today. Embarrassed, the boy greets Nana, and the girl says hello as well. 9 of them said the timing was perfect as she was about to introduce Rio, and after she asked them to take good care of him, the boy took the chance to introduce himself. The girl doesn't seem too thrilled about sharing the room with another member. The boy quickly introduces himself as Mills, points to the girl and says she's Ito and that they're both happy to meet him. Nina says she'll return to the reception desk and reminds Rio not to be late for tomorrow's seminar, which should be easy since he'll already be sleeping there. After Mana walks away, Nils puts on a shirt while Eda watches him with a serious expression. Nontrust says Miss Nana is very beautiful, and Echo tells him to calm down, saying everyone falls for the receptionists but he is not in the running. Indignant, he says every man dreams of settling down with one after becoming famous, and she replies those girls are promised to nobles, not ordinary adventurers. Meanwhile, Eda tells him to forget about it and says to our hero they do not need to be formal. Now that they're roommates, she admits she was worried about who they'd end up sharing the room with, since someone would eventually show up, and she's glad it turned out to be him. They all agree, saying he'd hate having someone like Dan from room 1 as a roommate. Rio, a little awkward, says that kind of thing. This is what happens when personalities clash. Nils says he is a swordsman, calls Edo a prehistus, and asks about Rio because Rio seems like a mage. Our hero looks at Nils and says that Nils is right and that Rio is a mage. The boy says he heard Nana mention the seminar and asks whether Rio will attend, and Rio confirms he will be there for all 5 days, and Nils adds that he is alive today only because of that seminar. Later, someone knocks on the door of room 10, and 9 appears with a newcomer, explaining the boy has just registered with a guild and will stay in the dorm with them. Ammon introduces himself. The swordsman steps forward, says his name is Nils and that the others are Rio and Ito. 9 informs them Ammon will attend the seminar the next day, tells him and the hero to go together, then says goodbye and leaves the room. In the room, Nose is mesmerized, saying 9A is truly beautiful, then looks at AM and Edo, notes AM seems very young and asks if he's already in a. Boy admits he's only 16, but after his family died, he decided to become an adventurer to survive. The swordsman says they're all basically in the same boat, and that it's great he and our hero are in the same class. Rio tells him they'll learn a lot together over the next 5 days, and the other 2 say they're heading back to the dungeon and wish them luck in the seminar. Elsewhere, Lin shouts at Abel that something is impossible. Abel, the warrior, says he hates giving her bad news, but confirms it is possible. Lin claims she knows the ice wall spell, but insists it cannot be cast in midair to fall on enemies, arguing the same is true for any element because no one can create magic or magical effects at a distance. Around themselves, her other two companions say Lin is getting too worked up and that if Abel said, if he saw it, they believe him. Turning to her companion, Lin says she knows she's right because it's common sense and accuses her of agreeing only out of attachment to Abel. Rhea agrees that even mages can only heal people nearby, and that it would be very convenient if they could heal from a distance. Abel explains he is simply describing events as they happen, and that this is how they get the yellow magic stone from the golem. As they examine the stone, his companions ask him what he plans to do with such a large gem, and Abel says he could sell it for cash, but he'd have to say who he'd split the profits with, and it would get complicated if he named Rio. He adds that registering in Lune does not make him loyal to the kingdom of Mightly, because others will try to win him over for their own kingdoms. Lemon says it's quite likely, because if even half of what Abel says about him is true, he is truly remarkable. Evil is upset when he realizes how little credibility he has with his friend. In any case, Jason might leave Lune and move to another city. Rhea says she understands, and if that happens, Lune would lose a vital resource, and by extension. In the kingdom of Megli, she says it would be terrible if he ended up in the Empire, and Abel replies that he wouldn't, since the Empire does not suit Rio. His friend asks what he means. Lin says the Empire is the only power that can rival the kingdom, and the warrior explains it's because of the name, adding that Rio thinks the name isn't cool, so he decided to hate the Empire and will never end up there. Not understanding, his friend changes the subject and tells Abel that if they did not go into the dungeon, they only took regular missions and ones they could not refuse. The warrior says he understands and sincerely thanks his friends. Rhea says she's glad he returned safely and that they split all the rewards into 4, so be sure to check the amount later. Abel. Surprised, Abel tells his friends to wait because he now understands what she said, says it's unfair since he wasn't there, and suggests splitting the rewards 3 ways. But his friends refuse because that is how the group works, and Abel remembers he also made money and still couldn't carry all the magic stomans he collected from defeating the monsters on the way there. He then said he had wyvern magic stones and asked the guild master to sell them, promising to split the profits with them as soon as he got the money, and his friends were astonished and asked how he had gotten the stones. Lena asks if Abel helped another group. Abel says no and that he already told her before. There was a wyvern nest to the south of the Evil Mountains, and they had to defeat those monsters on their way to Lune because leaving them would have been a terrible mistake. Still stunned, Lin says Abel is saying he and Rio defeated the weavers. He says yes, while Rio threw ice spears at their wings. He waited for the weaver to fall, then struck them in the eye. Lin is still trying to grasp that our hero used ice spears on the wings. It explains that wyverns use an air barrier around their bodies. That confirms they do use that barrier. They definitely defeated the wyvern. That tactic causes burns. Lin says she does not know how, since even Master Hilarion cannot use such powerful magic, and Rhea agrees. Rhea then comments that she only knows one person who. The Inferno mage from the Empire might match the level of magic Abel mentioned, but that's just a legend. They say he burned 1,000 kingdom soldiers with a single attack, defused a wyvern with one blow, and wiped out a rebel force that had barricaded themselves in a sea. With a smile, Abel says he definitely wouldn't want to meet the Inferno mage on the battlefield. More seriously this time, he says he would not want to face Rio on the battlefield. The warrior considers how Rio can cast magic without chanting, and how he uses cool-sounding names, but even Abel knew they were made up, and inventing those names suited his personality. Besides casting silent spells very quickly, he doubted he could break Ryo's ice wall even with full power and a Paman strike, especially since Ryo could fire ice spears from behind the wall and could still do so even if his opponent were a bit stronger. I can't think of anything that would let him win, and that's not even counting what he said after they arrived in the city of Lune. He recalls Rio posing with his sword and saying he could fight an opponent at close quarters with it. Fed up with imagining, Abel says it's not funny, and even with magic he can't see himself defeating Rio. His close combat skills already make his existence anomalous, and on top of that the Empire has its own anomaly, the so-called Hell Mage. Finally, Abel realizes making an enemy of a mage is a bad idea. On the 5th day of the beginner dungeon seminar, someone raises a hand and asks Rio to go ahead. Rio thanks them and asks whether a teleportation device can get him to the last 4 Eclair. Everyone turns to look at Rio as he stands at the gate's entrance. The instructor says Rio is well informed and some dungeons do have that mechanism. The instructor does not point out that the Lunden engine has this feature, but when it does, exploration resumes exactly where it left off, and he says that's all he knows because he does not know the technical details. Thank him and say it's no problem. At the end of the seminar, Ammon walks ahead of Rio with a smooth look on his face. Rio says he was right to guess the Lu dungeon lacked that feature and it's all good. Eamon says he's impressed, and our hero, feeling awkward, replies he was just curious and it wasn't a big deal. The gates make a loud noise when they open. Everyone steps into a fortified room lined with iron bars. The instructor had already explained that every few years a monster broke out of the dungeon, but he never mentioned that the bars were built to stop them from getting into the city. At the double gates he explains that names, dates, and entry times are recorded when people enter, and those who do not return are considered missing. The instructor says he's already recorded all the students' names and entry times, so they're officially admitted. Rio then notices something odd beside him. Looking over, he sees Ammon trembling and tells him to relax a bit because he's clearly nervous. Moving closer, our hero tells him to take a few deep breaths, and after breathing, Ammon says he feels a little better, so still worried he looks pale. Rio reassures him that everything will be fine because they are all in this together. Passing through the gates, they enter the dark staircase that leads to the dungeon's first floor. Ammon swallows and begins descending the shadowed stairs into the dungeon. When they reach the darkness first, someone says the place is huge, and the instructor says only weak monsters appear there so they can explore, but if they do not return within 2 hours, they will be declared missing and temporarily barred from re-entering the dungeon. From the side, Rio and Ammon advance with their weapons ready. Suddenly, our hero senses something is in there with them, as Ammon panic asks where. Ray says the target is 1 minute away, and he'll freeze it with ice magic, so Ammon can strike you with his sword. He says they'll be fine if they stop the enemy before it attacks. The creature moved a little further into the dark cave. A soldier ant appears before them, one Rio remembers from the book the fake Miguel gave him. The beast moves forward and stops in front of the heroes. Our hero says it does not spin acid, so the most effective tactic is to approach it from the side and decapitate it. Ammon confirms he understands and prepares to step aside. Ammon looks at Rio and says he'll do his best. The boy starts casting ice magic and tells Ammon he's launching the attack. Reaching out, he starts chanting his spell. Water bubbles rise above the soldier as he summons ice to pierce his enemy. Then countless ice spears rain down on the soldier, pinning him to the ground. Right then, Rio orders Ammon to circle the creature and cut off its head. Ammon can. They start running to the creature's side. Thanks to his speed, the swordsman strikes with his blade and severs the creature's head from his body. The hero throws his arms in the air and celebrates, while Ammon still does not quite understand what happened, staring in shock at the soldier he just defeated. He shouts to Rio that he did it, and Rio congratulates him, saying he did very well. Rio approaches the ant and says they'll take its magic stone to mark Ammon's first dungeon battle. Ammon, in disbelief, asks whether Rio is really sure about that. Rio replies that he is, because they're adventurers, and that is how they earn rewards in dungeons. The swordsman says he'll keep that in mind, and suggests they return to the meeting point. The hero says the slugs will eat the defeated beasts and clean up the mess. He believes the best way to build confidence in the dungeon is to have a successful experience. Mungs rise into the air as they celebrate finding and defeating a soldier ant on their first dungeon run. Ammon, mouthful of meat, says he only landed the finishing blow because Rio held the beast back so he could strike, and our hero adds the boy's swordsmanship was excellent and he doesn't need to be so modest. Nils adds that it doesn't matter who did what matters is that they celebrate anyway. After they finished eating and drinking, Ito and Nils, they say their team will explore the dungeon over the next 2 days and ask what the boys plan to do, while Ammon says he wants to keep exploring and will try to find parties to go with, asking if it is easy to find people willing to explore. The boy seems hesitant to team up with strangers, while Rio quietly mulls it over. The hero then turns to Ammon and asks if he'd like to explore up to the 3rd floor together. Clearly excited, Ammon says yes, and that he'd love to team up with Rio to explore the dungeon. Ada admits she's curious why ants are on the 1st floor, which usually only has bats and nils, and says she has encountered ants there before. The girl remembers and confirms that over the past 6 months, the Guild has been receiving reports of ants on floors 1 and 2. The Soursman wonders why that's happening. No says it happened to them a while back to you. They mention that the dungeon still hasn't been fully mapped. Someone approaches the table where our heroes are talking. Abel appears behind the boys and says the ants are showing up because they dig tunnels that let them move easily up and down between floors. Rio tells the war it's not cool for a veteran to mess with rookies like that. The warrior says he was only answering the newbie's question honestly. Abel introduces himself and asks if there are any hero roommates, saying Rio is strong but has personality issues. Our hero replies that if Abel is trying to provoke him with that nonsense, he accepts the challenge. Nils wonders if he has heard the name Abel before, then remembers that the name is Abel. Abel of the Crimson Sword stands and introduces himself as Nils, a fellow swordsman, and asks the warrior for a handshake, clearly moved. Abel says that's fine, tells the boy to do his best, and reminds him that survival is the most important thing for adventurers. The warrior then shakes Nils's hand. Rio asks what he does, thinking how easily the warrior says wise things and shakes hands with others, and whether that explains his popularity. The warrior says his last job kept him away for a while, so he only returned recently. Just then Lin sees Abel and shouts that that's where he'd been hiding. Laria says they still need to report to the guildmaster. Abel, clearly annoyed, says he wasn't hiding and was just helping the rookies with their questions. Lin apologizes to our hero and says she's taking Abel away from them, asking Warren to grab the warrior. Warren reaches out, but Abel insists he has 2 legs and can walk on his own. Rio apologizes again, says they still have matters to handle at the guild and that it's fine. And in the background, Warren grabs Abel and drags him off while Abel shouts to Rhea that he's a traitor. Our hero yelled at the Warrens to stop ignoring him and to put him down, while everyone at the table stared wide-eyed at the scene that had just unfolded, and he watched with a smile. Amen then says it was an excellent performance. His eyes sparkle as he shouts in his room about how incredible Abel is. Inside Luz dungeon, the first floor has double security bars. Now we descend to the second floor and see torches along the wall. Rio orders his eyes to pierce his enemies. Spears shot up beneath the beast's feet ahead of him, pinning them to the ground. Amen readies his sword to strike the paralyzed beasts. The Swearisman moves his torch closer to the bodies of the defeated beasts as Rio follows. Our hero tells the swordsman he did an excellent job, and the swordsman thanks him for the compliment. Rio Lin says he has an idea and suggests a one-on-one for the next battle. He notes that a calm opponent is a greater challenge, and that he will only injure the wall's front legs, which I agree with. The swordsman then asked our hero if he was absolutely sure about that. I'll Rios. Eamon thanks our hero for the training and company, but asks if it is enough, and Rio tells him not to worry. An observer notes the boy's fighting style resembles Abel's and asks if he learned it from someone in his old village, and the boy, surprised to be compared to the warrior, replies that he learned from a former adventurer there. He says he used to call the man Grandpa Cairo, attended a famous martial arts school, and worked for your heart on his farm. He apologizes and says that's all he can remember. Rio says you grow much stronger when the fundamentals are deep in your bones, and that is how Abel is. They move on through the dungeon's second floor, escorting the swordsman out. Someone asks how the hero knows so much about martial arts despite being a mage. Recalling his training with Adele Han, he said a teacher taught him, but even with his own style, he does not know much about the subject. Eamon then says it's amazing he can be both a swordsman and a mage. Then he notices Rio doesn't always carry a sword. Rio draws his sword and holds it out to the swordsman. The swordsman is surprised to see our hero's sword glowing faintly in the dungeon. When asked what it is, our hero says his master gave it to him and that it's a sword made for water magic users. Ammon sees the blade, notes it's made of ice, and says someone who isn't a water mage couldn't wield it. He says he's never seen anything like it before as Rio spots 2 smaller wolves approaching. They prepare for battle again as the smaller wolves spot them and charge at the boys. Rio says he'll wound one of the wolves' hind legs, then the swordsman can strike. He sent a jet of water and 2 small ice spears toward the wolves. A water jet hits one wolf, and small ice spears strike the other's hind legs. They leap back, recovering from the attack, while one, bleeding from its legs and panting heavily, stares at Ammon. Locking eyes with the smaller wolf, the swordsman steps forward in a fighting stance toward the target. Real watches intently as the wolf and swordsman face each other. He notes Ammon's fighting style leaves no openings for the enemy, but he's worried about the boy's stamina. He also believes stamina can be built through training and that a swordsman can develop it. Suddenly he realizes he hasn't been practicing his runs while training in magic, and he hasn't trained even once since leaving his home near the forest. Panting heavily, Ammon says he managed to. After defeating the smaller wolf in Rio, he smiles and congratulates him. Our hero then encloses them in a floor-to-ceiling ice barrier to keep them safe. Beast can't easily break the ice barrier he summoned, so they can rest for a bit. Ammon collapses to the ground and breathes a sigh of relief, still panting from exhaustion. Ryo tells him not to rush or push too hard and to drink some water. Now the rest of the boys say they've never seen an ice barrier so thin and practically transparent. Our hero explains that impurities in the water and air make ice look cloudy like people expect, adding that removing all impurities from the water would produce transparent ice without magic, but in this case it was made with magic. Magic, Aemon says water magic is amazing, and Ryo agrees, doing his part to raise the status of water mages. The swordsman admits he never expected fighting moving opponents to be so tiring, and our hero asks if he has ever fought beasts, while Amon says he has only faced monsters as part of a group of humans against a single beast, and Ryo says he now understands the difference between fighting in a group and facing a monster alone. Doing it alone is much more stressful, and he says the swordsman's fighting style wears him out very quickly. He adds that improving his fighting style will reduce how often he gets hurt, and he just needs to train his stamina to get better. He says running is the best exercise to improve stamina, and practicing strikes builds arm and shoulder strength. Aemon says his master taught him exercises and stances to train every day. He says that if he sticks to all that with discipline every day, it will help him grow a lot. He says he traveled with Abel for a long time, and although Abel was a prodigy, he still woke up early and trained every day. The young swordsman impressed him because even Abel trained daily. Aemon looks down and says he may not have the talent to be a swordsman. Fabio says it will tell them what the strongest champion he knows once said about what talent really means. True talent is the ability to keep moving forward. That perseverance makes you strong, and he asks the swordsman whether he will keep going or give up. Fired up, the swordsman says he will not give up and will keep trying. The next morning, the sun rose into the sky. In room 10, Ryo crouched beside the bed, and we could see the other beds. The beds are empty. Ammon is panting and sweating heavily. From Hito and Niddle's distant watchroom, the swordsman keeps running outside, then the boy. I asked the girl if they'd have to run out too, and she confirmed they would. Ryo, finishing getting ready and just reaching the door, saw both of them heading outside as well. Seeing what was happening, he brightened and hummed happily. Next, a bat is slammed down onto the table, while someone says it should be enough. Nina says she has a good collection of books and asks which ones the other person wants to buy. Ryo says he likes some books about alchemy. The city of Lune has 2 libraries, one in the north and one in the south, and the southern library is closer to the Adventurers Guild and stocks more beginner-friendly books. 3 books caught our hero's eye, but the bookstore did not lend books, it only sold them. Ryo's first choice is a collection of alchemy recipes, but it costs 10 gold coins and he only has 5. At that moment, you remember you have the magic stones from the wyverns he defeated, so he decides to return to the guild for now. Humming happily, Ryo walks through the streets, thinking the magic stones sold well. The price and the idea that you won't have to work for a while feel better than ever. Then Ryo notices something strange and looks up at the sky. Everyone on the street stops and looks up as an incredible solar eclipse begins to unfold. The hero realizes he never knew such events occurred in this world. As the sun remains eclipsed, someone near our hero asks aloud what is happening. Ryo suddenly senses that something has happened. It was something he didn't expect. He stops and stands completely still in the middle of the street. Our hero wonders if he's been cast into a void inside a fantasy world. Alone, he feels as if everything around him has vanished, and he wonders whether he is the only person left in the emptiness. He thinks any movement could alert others nearby, and can only think of one thing to do, so he exhales and watches the shapes in the air around him. Next, he activates his magic and uses moisture in the air to create a kind of sonar, which eventually bounces back and lets our hero detect a human-sized figure. Different are their Eversides that attack using his powerful 10-layer ice barrier. 10 massive ice barriers suddenly appeared in front of us in rapid succession. A voice suddenly appears in the hero's mind and seems to wonder whether he has caught a human. He realizes whoever it is broke through his ice barrier and must be strong, but it is still 200 meters away. The voice sounds unnaturally close. The voice returns. Impressed and convinced that Ryo is an excellent specimen, the boy remained. Still operating his sonar, he waits to see what happens next. Instead of revealing the source of the mysterious voice, the voice belongs to what appears to be a demon woman with a curvaceous figure. The woman says that the ice, Ryo's magic lets our hero see her as an Akuma, and then a massive wave of fire is launched toward our hero. A deepening clash echoes as the boy doubts he can stop such force while the woman smiles and attacks him with her magic. Ryo creates. He raised an ice barrier in front of him to block the incoming attack. A few seconds later, he wonders whether the attack is over. Then the barrier in front of him shatters, shocking those behind him. When the barrier breaks, a spear of air shoots straight into his heart and strikes him squarely. The impact sends our hero flying several meters away. Our hero recovers and thinks that was a close call. A woman uses the moment to approach him and says her air spirer couldn't pierce the boy. Staring at Ryo, she says his cloak belongs to the Fairy King, so her attack may have failed, and she adds that he still defended himself well. She even says that in that case she'll have to cut him down herself. Realizing Yakuma's intent, our hero begins to draw his sword. With a lightning-fast move, the woman appears in front of our hero, sword drawn and ready to deliver a killing blow. Barely dodging, Ryo has almost no time to react, as she immediately follows with a second attack. Both start clashing swords with fierce intensity. Smiling, the woman attacks and parries blows from the hero. During their exchange, both pick the same moment to cast magic, touch, and begin to gather power. An explosion knocks both back and stops their flurry of attacks. Taking the opportunity, she says our hero casts spells incredibly fast and calls him a monster, and he replies that he'd rather not be called that by her. Realizing he can understand her, she says he has become very dangerous, and a massive explosion erupts in the sea as the Akuma says she will have to kill our hero. While they trade sword strikes, Ryo wonders if she had already been trying to kill him. During the sword fight, the hero conjures an ice spear and hurls it at the Akuma. It was won and quickly defended, as if it were nothing. Seizing the opening while she defended, our hero conjured countless ice spears around her. Nothing happens as they stare at each other, while the mist from the water magic begins to clear. Then it asked our hero if that was all he had, and the boy replied, not even close. Without hesitation, he conjures a barrage of ice spears and hurls them at the Akuma. Next, he unleashes Corvus of water jets at the woman, who raises a barrier to shield herself as waterfalls cascade from the sky. With all this power and water magic, the trio summons a downpour over the Akuma, drenching the entire city. The wooden stairs stand as a hero, satisfied that she managed to defend against all his attacks. Standing in the rainy cause, she never says anything strange about the falling rain, just as our hero utters the word boy. The Akuma howls in pain as the rain hitting her skin boils and burns her flesh. In Avani, she screams in pain while focusing on her counterattack. A massive explosion erupts around the Akuma, forcing our hero to retreat to keep you from being caught. Ryo stares at the Akuma, beginning to tire and pant. She says her time is up and that she can't remember the last time she enjoyed fighting this much, and Ryo tells her to leave, noticing she has regenerated. Looking at him, she says he enjoyed it as much as she did, and that she cannot control the space created during the eclipse, while our hero watches her cautiously. She introduces herself as Leonor from Uraka Albuquerque, and when asked for a hero name, he calls her Akuma. Startled, she says she should have destroyed him, even if it costs her last breath, because he knows her true form. Leonor says she does not have enough time, and that he cannot be easily destroyed, so she bids him farewell and says they will meet again. Our hero makes clear he does not want a reunion with Yakuma. Someone tells him to stop saying that, because with his power he'll meet her again or someone like her, and warns him not to die for others. She says she intends to kill him and will be much stronger when they meet next. With that, she says goodbye to our hero, Real. Like waking from a dream, he returns to the same spot in the city where he had been before being cast into the void. Unsure if he's really back, he finds a bench and sits to think about what just happened. He lets out a relieved sigh and thinks he somehow survived. He remembers the last time he nearly died fighting deadly water that nullified magic to attack him. But that morning, facing Lei, she dodged and shattered his ice spears as if they were nothing. Then a sudden pain in his chest grabs his attention. Remember, this is where Leonor's air spear struck him, and he thinks he must have been hurt. He thanks his master for the cloak, because without it, he would probably have a huge hole in his shoulder, even though the cloak has no scratches. He presses his lips to the sore spot and instantly regrets it. Remembering his fight with Leonora, he wonders whether her attacks were magic, since they were overwhelmingly powerful and her speed was absurd. In under a second, she could strike and pull back, as if using air magic to move faster. These calls say her time was running out, and that it must have been because of the solar eclipse. Remember that the space may have existed only during the eclipse, and that their fight did not damage anything in the city, only the two of us. He feels there is much he still does not understand about what happened, but there is no time to dwell on it now. He must buy the alchemy book, go back to his room, and research Akumas, even though the false Miguel knew nothing about them. You remember asking Abel about Akumas, and he said he only knows about demons, not Akuma. If the only people who can do it must be a noble's third son, and even he doesn't know, finding information about them in this world will be very difficult. Our hero gets up, follows the rules, and returns to the dorm. Later, our boy returns to the dorm. Entering the room, he finds it empty and wonders if they are still training. Mills is panting heavily, says that if he weren't so tired, he could easily knock everyone down. 5 people tell him there is nothing quite like the cry of a beaten dog. Edo replies that it is a beautiful line coming from the people who ambushed them. One of the men replies that she must be joking, saying they cannot expect monsters to announce their arrival or to stop attacking when they are tired. He adds that they must be ready for anything. Walking nearby, he noticed something strange coming from his left. The man steps up to Nils and tells him he should be glad this fight isn't real. Warrior curses the man as Rio says anyone who lets their guard down only has themselves to blame. That's lame. I shoot a spear up from the ground toward the men's backs. One of your Nils notices what is happening to his friends and steps in. In the scene, Real asks if the guy wants to know what happened and says he made ice spears that pierced friends from behind. The guys try to curse our hero, but Rio interrupts him, saying you should never let your guard down. He says he should have warned him before attacking, as he told Nils to do with monsters, and our hero says this is what they get for being lazy, while Nils complains the whole situation is a pain. He adds that they've been running every morning, and that from now on they'll run only on weekends to conserve their energy, while Rio calls out to the guy who's been standing there like an idiot the whole time. He says he's Dan and from room 4. Seeing Dan, the hero asks what Dan will do next, and Dan plans to slink away with his tail between his legs now that his friends were caught off guard. Death draws his sword and says he will never back down. Recklessly, he charges at the boys. Ryo sidesteps and hits Dan in the ribs with his sword's hilt. Dan curls up in pain while our hero goes back to his friends. Our hero thought hitting Dan with his hands would do more damage because of the armor, but he still did serious harm using only the sword's hilt. Rio says he was at death's door earlier, that the adrenaline from the fight may still be running through him, and asks Adu to heal his wounds. His show is about the bruise he got from fighting you. Kuma, Ito says the injury seems serious, but at least there are no broken bones, and she can tell the blow was harsh, adding that if it had landed closer to his heart, he could have been taken out. Then heal our hero with a spell. The caption says this is what barely escaping death looks like, and he's just happy to be alive. Edo asks what he fought against. One of our heroes smiles and says he'll tell them some other time. Damn. In room 4, he remains crouched, reeling from our hero's blow. Real thinks back to being cornered by Leon for a moment, and now he's showing off against F-rank adventures, making the contrast kind of ridiculous. Later in the bathhouse, Nils thinks he is a hero. He says that if he hadn't shown up when he did, it wouldn't have happened. I've been humiliated, and Ammon says you move really fast, at least for a mage. The hero says mages these days can move like that just fine, and Nils tells Rio to stop teasing Ammon like that. Everyone stays together, relaxing and enjoying a well-deserved bath. The Kingdom of Nightly is one of the cities in the central province, and Lune is the largest border city south of the Cape. Welcome to the Adventurers Guild Canteen. No says he, Emma, and Edo are forming a party for the dungeon the next day, and asks if Riot wants to join, but Riot apologizes and declines. He then says there's something he needs to do in the city. Mill says that's fine. He had expected that answer. Real immediately began his career as a D-rank adventurer, and his quick defeat of Dan from room 4 only confirmed his roommate's suspicions. A huge power gap separates them, and dungeon expeditions are usually much easier when strong adventurers are present. This causes a lot of stress for both stronger and weaker party members, so the guild recommends forming parties with people of similar. Despite his strength, our hero was an outsider. New adventurers are usually not very strong at the start. Someone like him was a rare exception, and even the guild couldn't have predicted he'd move into the dorm. On Monday, his friends say goodbye to Rio as they leave for the dungeon. To improve his magic control and stamina, our hero will run around the city walls. The day before, Leonor's powerful spells had outclassed Rio's, but he cast faster than she did. That's why he wants to use his magic faster and more precisely, and must keep building his strengths and training his weaknesses until they are gone. Even so, he felt she was ridiculously faster than him. Rio remembers Leonor covering dozens of meters in an instant, likely using wind magic, and he wonders how he could do the same with his water magic. Believing he can shoot jets of water from his feet, he still needs a way to launch himself off his back without breaking his neck. He might even shoot a jet out of the back of his neck. That could work. Release a water jet along his entire back, and he can freeze the ground as he flies forward. Freezing the ground ahead, he estimates he can use up to 256 water jets right now and focuses to test his theory. A jet of water shoots from his back, but it doesn't have the effect he expects. He kneels on the ground and says he eventually lost to some of the men. Whether it's a thing or someone, he thinks he might not be able to do it now, but when he manages to release 1,024 water jets, he may be able. In the dungeon, Nils tells Ito that hunting goes much faster, and they have another swordsman with them, which helps against goblins. Aimonin says goblins are easier to beat than smaller wolves because they're slower. It's a joke. They take a break and recommend it. Someone mentioned the salt yesterday, but he doesn't remember what was said. While you don't perform healing magic, Nils explains that drinking water and licking salt is a tradition from his village, supposedly done after sweating. Peter says she dislikes seeing a man's wounds while Nils rests, and said it was a close call. He says goblin archers shouldn't be on the 5th floor, and now that he knows they are, he doesn't feel safe going further, and Ito agrees. They return sooner than expected, but still get more loot than usual, even after splitting it 3 ways. Arriving at the Adventurers Guild Hall, Nils shyly greets Nana. Nana, stammering, asks if they wrapped up early today, and Nils says yes and begins to compliment her. Hito steps in and tells Mina they came back early because a goblin archer was on the dungeon's 5th floor, showing the magic stone in her hand, and Mina examines the stone in Hito's hand and confirms it is from a goblin archer. 9A says she will inform the guildmaster and update the section record so others will know, noting she hasn't seen a report like this in years. Noel starts to speak to Enmana again, but Ito interrupts, saying they need to sell their magic stones. As the guild master fills out paperwork, someone knocks on his door and he tells them to come in. 9E enters and reports that a goblin archer has been spotted on the dungeon's 5th floor. The guild leader stops what he is doing, shocked, and asks her to repeat it. He says archers should only appear starting on the 10th floor, and 9E confirms the report. Our guild leader says this must be a sign and asks her which B-rank adventure groups are currently in the city. He then tells him the Crimson Swords and the White Brigade are in town, while Hugh asks whether that includes Feltz and his brigade. She says they returned 2 days ago and are still in the city, and the guild leader wants her to get both groups to the guild within an hour. Abel says even the White Brigade has been called, and he is not good at dealing with them. Rear objects that he has no right to say that since they've known each other since childhood, and Lynn says Abel only complains, and that you should follow Warren's quiet example once in a while. Crimson Swords reach the guild master's door and knock, and a voice from inside tells them to come in. Felt Heinlein and Shenna, the White Brigade's captain and vice-captain, greet Abel as he enters the room. In the room, Abel greets them, and Phelps comments that Abel always greets people so stiffly. The guild leader says the group probably already knows why they were called, and thanks them for coming, adding that it's about goblin archers arriving on the 5th floor, and the warrior asks how sure the leader is, who replies he is 100% certain. He shows the magic stone to the goblin archer, and says that 3 F-rank adventurers encountered goblins on the 5th floor, and one of the goblins was an archer. He will respond that the future looks promising if an F-rank group managed to hunt goblins even with an archer among them, and the leader explains that it was Nils' group who found the goblins, and that they were lucky he is a level-headed adventurer, one of the bright future heads. The warrior asks if those are Ryo's roommates, and the other says yes, Nils, Ito, and Eamon, adding he had no idea Abe knew them. The warrior says you met them briefly, and that they're sure to be good adventurers because they know how important it is to stay alive. Then Phelps, leader of the White Brigade, interrupts their conversation and says, so the goblin archers have been confirmed on the 5th floor. What does the guild leader want them to do about it? Know that the Crimson Sword and the White Brigade enter the dungeon to see if another Great Surge is coming. The Great Surge is an event when the monster population explodes and beasts that shouldn't be on upper floors start appearing. The guild master promises 100 gold coins now and 200 more when they return. Abel prepares to ask a question for peace of mind. He asks if all they need to do is check for another Great Surge, and the guildmaster says yes, telling them to return immediately if they confirm one. He says the plan is to use the double barrier to stop the monsters from reaching the city, then defend with the knights and prepare a counterattack, and he wants them to enter the dungeon tomorrow morning, while he blocks new adventurers from entering. He adds that staff from the other guild branch, by the dungeon entrance will prevent anyone else from going down, and asks if they will accept the job. Abel says the Crimson Sword is accepted and felt the same by the White Brigade. On Tuesday, just after 9 in the this morning, someone asks if they will receive additional information because of their report. Ammon is the one talking with Nils, and the guild posted a notice based on their report. He then wonders where Rio is and remembers Rio said he was going to the library. The guild has posted a city announcement saying that, starting Tuesday, dungeon expeditions are suspended until further notice. On a cloudy Tuesday morning in the city of Loon, just after 9, Rio heads to the Southern Library to find books about Akumas and learn more about the world he lives in. Right now, M and Ito and Nils are standing in front of the guild bulletin ball. The board even read the news that dungeon adventures were suspended. Hito says they must have received more information after their report. Inside the dungeon, Abel meets Phelps and sees how many people are in their 20s. Only half of the White Brigade remained. Phelps says yes, he left. The city has only D rank and lower adventurers, but they brought only C rank and above and say they're ready to move at any time. Ivo glances to the side in surprise and says the guild master is there too. The master says he mentioned yesterday he'd stay at the branch by the dungeon entrance because he'll need to make quick decisions when they return. He tells them to get going, and Abel asks them to wait a moment. Abel says he has a bad feeling about the first floor and asks Elinti to use her wind magic to scan it, and Len says she will and casts her spell into the air. Later, she says there are over 100 monsters on just the first floor. Shops benefit because the Great Surge is already being built. After the gunshot, the Goat Master yells for everyone to run up the stairs and alert the night barracks to call for help. Once everyone runs back through the doorway, a massive metal door. The door closes behind them, blocking access to the stairs. A man reports everyone has moved to the top of the stairs and the entrance has been sealed. He then looks to the side and feels fear as beastly claws bend nearby. Banzi saw countless goblins filling the halls near the entrance. A battle begins as Goblin shouts at our heroes. Use stealth to help them use long-range magic and arrows, while the vanguard protects the mages and archers from enemy spells and projectiles. Arrow's firebar heroes attack the enemies, defeating many along the way. At the Adventurers Guild, 9A announces over a megaphone that because of the Great Tide, beasts are invading the city and long-range attacks are now authorized. A row of archers along the dungeon gate walls prepare their arrows, as Niner reminds them to stay hydrated. Inside the dungeon, Abel says it's only goblins and a few archers, and that it will be a test of endurance, and Lynn says they must defeat them to reach the boss. The warrior warns it's only goblins this time, and they will keep coming until they kill the general, who will not show himself easily. A goblin mage appears soon after, and someone warns everyone to be careful because magical attacks are coming. Seeing the guildmaster, a warrior urges him to go to the dungeon's north wall. At the north wall, many warriors are pouring in to engage the goblins directly. The guildmaster was amazed that the knights had already run out of arrows, and he did not hesitate to join them because together they could easily crush this goblin wave. An earth mage starts chanting, calling on the earth to form a shield. A stone wall rises before Phelps, shielding him from the attacks. That same mage shouts that the goblet will be defeated soon, and mages will begin to appear. He helps, then cuts one of the beasts, crossing his spear's path in half. Exhausted, Abel plunges his sword into the ground in front of the Sami goblin. In the heat of battle, a nearby fighter uses his massive shield to send goblins flying close to our warrior. After defeating another goblin archer, he watches Smiley smile faintly and tells everyone to hold on just a bit longer. The defeated goblin in front of Abel begins to lose its life force as distant noise builds. Phelps stops and stares at the far end of the first floor, and Abel does the same. Behind the fallen goblin, 3 goblins appear. Each is much larger than. A normal, able person looks at them with unease. 3 goblin generals appearing among the goblins already defeated. This can only mean one thing. There's a goblin cave deeper in the dungeon. There have been reports of goblin kings before. They usually appear every few decades, lead thousands of goblins, and can destroy entire cities. Since they already know there are over 10,000 goblins in this dungeon, the presence of one should have been obvious. Even though no one has ever been born in a dungeon before, Abel tells Phelps he has no idea how strong a goblin can really be and that he wants to defeat the 3 generals. Before the king arrives, he says he'll handle one, the leader of the White Brigade will handle another, and the remaining groups will take the third. Abel leaps swiftly toward one of the goblin generals. He lands a close-range strike on the goblin, but it barely affects the enemy. A major exchange of fireballs between Abel and and the beast destroying the Malayan game. Abel creates some distance and starts planning his next video. Next move, the goblin launches a fierce attack on Abel, who dodges aside with skill. He then helps shape their strategy. Both wore the grin of warriors who love to fight. White Brigade leader spins and strikes one of the goblin generals. Seconds later, he notices something odd coming from the back of the first fool. Able to notice the same, the thing yells for everyone to get down. Then a massive white lightning bolt strikes the three goblin generals from the waist up. Two warriors duck and cover their ears as lightning blasts overhead. Right after one of them asks if that's the Goblin King, a monstrous beast appears, also wondering whether it tried to eliminate them along with its generals. Thinking about what the attack was and whether it was really magic, he realizes the opponent only moved his arm without chanting. It's best to stay close to him. He shouts that he and Phelps will engage the beast. As they get close to the Goblin King, our warrior is startled by the monster's attack coming toward him. He shifts his swords to the side and Abel manages to block the Goblin King's strike. He feels the weight of the blow and struggles to hold his defense while Phelps spots an opening. Phelps then drives his spear into the beast's arm as it attacks Abel. The monster reacts to the White Brigade leader's blow and roars at both of them, while Abel keeps his eyes on the beast. Both unleash a brutal barrage of strikes on the monster, fighting with fierce effort and determination. The beast seems to be taking heavy damage in the fight with the two powerful warriors. In a careless moment, Abel trips and curses as he falls. Seeing the opening Abel stumble made, the Goblin King charges in to strike him. Our warrior shouts instructions for people to follow. The White Brigade leader runs toward our warrior, calling to him. Abel then attempts the combat technique Absolute Shadow. Relentless, the Goblin King drives his ferocious advance toward our heroes. When it reaches Abel, it starts winding up for a punch. In wake it's close enough, our warrior uses his perfect. Using a piercing sword technique, she hits the Goblin King squarely. Covering the beast's blow, he calls to Lin to attack while he holds it in place. From a distance, Lin and Warren see the giant beast still able to fight. Right after that, our warrior uses the Absolute Shadow combat technique again. The city in the distance is swept by wind and dust from Abel's technique, and back in the dungeon, we see a large dark mark on the ground, with Lin stunned and the Goblin King bearing a massive dark wound. Something lies on its chest, and it drops to its knees before a great warrior. Phelps, the White Brigade leader, approaches Abel and sees the beast kneeling in a dark pool. It was our hero's complete disbelief at the scene before him. The tavern is packed with people celebrating something Rio does not know yet, all cheerful with mugs raised. Eamon spots his friend Rio and waves him over. Rio walks up, grins, and says he'll eat enough for a whole week while Eamon greets him, happy that he arrived just in time for the party so he can eat and drink whatever he wants. It's all set. The whole guild looks on as the souvenir delicious plate, full of food, is placed in front of our hero. Cheerful always gets upset when he's late and tells him to grabbing a mug and a plate from the side. He eats as much as he wants, and still confused, Margero finally asks what the celebration is about. They explain that a major surge happened today, and you learned about it during the seminar. This only occurs once every few years. Rio then realizes that because they survived the Great Surge, everyone is celebrating the victory. He just wants to grab a plate before the boy continues his story. After a while, Nils begins to talk about how amazing Abel is. During the fight, he was as skilled with a bow as with a sword, and he nearly defeated the Goblin King on his own. Kuro wonders how he nearly defeated the Goblin King by himself. The other explains that Lin landed the final blow only because Abel was holding the beast and shouting for everyone to attack. Ryo says it would have been bad if the king had been pierced by Abel, and it sounds like a wind spell did it. That rare spell ended up taking down the Goblin King. Ito, who had been sleeping next to Nils, wakes and says it was a spell called Bullet Rain, a very high-level magic that's rarely used. Nils jumps in surprise and looks at Ito, who seconds later falls back into her food coma and sleeps again. They're here to say the name Bullet Rain sounds cool, and Nils agrees, saying it fires dozens of invisible blades, and he's just thankful none of them hit anyone. A voice chimes in, saying the only reason he wasn't hit was that he dodged using his combat arts. Abel appears beside the boys in a heroic pose, while Rio asks what combat art is, and the warrior says it is a fighting technique. Absolute Shadow, usually used by swordsmen, lets them dodge magic and long-range attacks, and Rio once again thinks the name is really cool. Abel knew our heroes would comment on the name. Laughing, the heroes said Nils had praised Abel for his heroism in battle, while the other boy hid his embarrassed face. The experienced warrior says Nils and his friends were essential, running back and forth reloading the archer's arrows, and without them they would have lost. The boy, sans Tull, was proud and tried to hold back his excitement. Abel says they'd have had an easier time if Rio had been with them and asks where he was. Our hero says he was at the library. Rio says he's glad he didn't steal Abel's moment of victory, and Abel tells him to shut up. Len and Ria arrived, saying they had finally found Abel and were sure he would be with Ria because he had been very worried about the boy. And Abel, embarrassed, said it wasn't like that, and that he had only meant the battle would have been much easier if our hero had been with them. The media then reports a message from the guildmaster. He will report to the Marguerite of tomorrow at noon, and if Abel, will have to go with him. Rio teases Abel, calling it a grand reward for his great performance in battle. Abel insists Lin landed the final blow, but the girl tells him to stop dodging responsibility. She says she only got the spell off because he pinned the goblin to the ground with his sword. Turning to Rio, she says she wants to ask him something, then mentions Abel told her he could summon extremely tall ice walls from a distance and asks if that's true. Smiling, our hero says yes and tells her he can create walls up to 40 meters high in the sky above him. In Eyes Wide, someone begins to speak, as Rio explains it was hard at first, and he had to train a lot to reach that point. Still surprised, our hero turns to the side and warns them to stop because it's dangerous. A pointless argument among young adults starts when something gets knocked to the floor and someone asks for a cloth to clean it up. 5 days after the Great Tide battle, Ammon watches 5 hooded figures pass on the street and instantly recognizes them as the research group. At the guild headquarters, Nil stands in front of the mission board and says sadly there's nothing on it. Mina, beside him, apologizes. She reports that in the last 2 days, all E and F rank missions have been taken, and the purchasing department has asked them to stop issuing those for a while. Speaking smoothly, he tells Nina he knows it's not her fault but the guild's purchasing department, then thanks her a bit too loudly for the hard work she's been doing, while Ito and Ammon arrive behind him, a bit embarrassed. Rio was walking nearby at the time, and they explained they came to get missions and why there weren't any, then asked if he was looking to buy something, and he said he was trying to buy magic copper to practice alchemy, but the purchasing department wasn't selling. Our hero planned to get it on the dungeon's 5th floor, so he's not too worried, but all the shops in town that might sell copper are out right now. Ed asked if there really is magic copper on the 5th floor of the dungeon, and Nils asked if it is too expensive, to which our hero replies that it is. The last time Rio saw one the size of his fist for sale, it cost 500,000 florins, or 50 gold coins. Edo explains the guild clash with alchemists because the alchemists buy up magic copper, causing prices in the city to skyrocket. But Rio offers the boys a mission and asks them to accept it. According to him, you can find magic copper in a new part of the city at the abandoned mine near the village of Rousey, a half-day walk from there. He offers 4 coins per person and 25 for each fist-sized piece of copper, provided everyone returns safe and sound. The boys quickly accept the mission and find the conditions suit them. Rio does the math and points out it's still cheaper than buying it directly. He notes the mission isn't from the guild, so it won't help his rank, but they said he's not a problem. Suvan and the 3 friends head toward the abandoned mine. He could have gone himself, but he wanted to help his roommates make some money since he already had plenty and didn't want to just hand it out. While they collected magic copper, he could practice alchemy with materials available in the city. At the northern bookstore, unlike the southern one, the books were more specialized and less general. Lin walks toward something. A specially engraved door guards the restricted archives and opens only to those authorized by the Maghrave or to adventurers of B rank and higher. Those archives contain many materials and texts not meant for the public, including high-level spells from every element and forbidden magic. After checking for a while, Lin concluded it wasn't listed there after all, but she still needed to be sure there were no spells that could create ice walls from a distance. Across the Central Nations, Mage's spells and their incantations are recorded in books, including the spell she used to defeat the Goblin King. High-level magic uses long incantations and requires a seasoned mage, since the spell can consume and destroy its caster. That's why those books are kept away from the public. Even so, she couldn't find any record of the spells Rio had been using in combat. Casting spells begins by reciting an incantation, which produces the magical effect. Anyone with magical aptitude can cast them that way. As they become more familiar with magic, they progress from basic to intermediate and then advanced spells. There is an original magic that requires understanding temptations and thinking about Rio, and she likens it to a water element version of the explosive fire mage. a fire mage famed for using incredibly advanced magic nobody had ever seen or heard of, who can use magic without incantations, and whose original magic is even less understood. A woman steps out of the shadows behind Lin and says it's been a while since they last met. Lin turns to see who had arrived so quietly and quickly spots a long, thin sword hanging from the woman's waist. She then spots the only B-rank member of the Win group still in the city of Lu. Lin smiles alongside Greed Sarah. He asked what Lin was doing in such an unexpected place. She said she was researching something, but couldn't find anything, and mentioned she had heard Sarah was away on missions from the capital. She confirms she was away but returned yesterday, then says goodbye, mentions the library, and waits for her. Frustrated, Lin thinks she might as well go on for her. It's home too. From room 10 in the Adventurers Guild dorm, you can see the courtyard and the training area. While Mills, Ito, and Emmon carried out the mission Rio gave them, our hero kept testing new formulas until he finally created his first antidote. After making his first antidote, someone suddenly shouted at your boy, asking him to stop. Rio stops what he's doing and looks to the side, alert and trying to see what's causing the shouting. NC Dan from room 1 said the girl clearly didn't like it and told the guys to leave her alone. A man holds the young woman and says she can serve them drinks, and if she is good, they might keep her while they are in the city. Ario watches the scene in the courtyard from a low window. He suspects they spent nights trying to take advantage of a young woman who had just become an adventurer around Ammon's age, and notices Dan standing there. Nearby, the men say that if she lives there, she must be a new, broke adventurer, and that they can help her out, offering she could keep them company for the night, while the girl screams and refuses and Rio would rather not intervene. He figures there are plenty of places in the city where they could have gone to have fun, and they could have just gone to one of them. Dan yells at the men, saying the girl said no, and that if they do not stop pushing her, they will be beaten. One of the men pays attention and asks him to repeat what he just said. Releasing the girl who runs toward Dan, he says he will teach the adventurers a lesson in manners. Dan protects the girl as 2 other adventurers join him. The knight draws his sword and says he will not kill the boy and that it is only a lesson, so Dan should be grateful. Dan faces the knight with another adventurer at his side. He waits tensely for the Michael charge to reach his home. Out of nowhere, the knight flips through the air and lands face first on the ground. Dan is in shock and doesn't understand what just happened. Then Mike curses and tries to get up toward the adventurer. Telling him not to move, he raises himself a bit and says he'll teach the adventurer a lesson. Then he falls to the ground again, this time on his back. A friend asked Dan what he had done to his friend. Dan says he did nothing and that the man is just falling to the ground on his own. With rage in his voice, the chicken tries once more to rise and lead the knight toward death. Once more he falls face first to the ground, unable to stay upright. The boy stays frozen as the man keeps trying to get up and attack him, only to fall each time. In that moment, the Meg's friends stare, frozen like the adventurers, watching with a clear understanding of what is happening. Real watches calmly from his low window. Phelps, leader of the White Brigade, then appears and orders them to stop the show. Dan recognizes Phelps immediately as night finally settles, and he rudely asks Scootle, the long-haired man, when he arrived. Phelps says they behave like this, still call themselves mates of the realm, and should be ashamed. Angry, the knight says an adventurer is trying to teach him manners, but someone interrupts and tells him to shut up. Phelps says this is not about being an adventurer, but about being a knight, and you should act like one. The knight claims no one stands against the realm's knights, and says that if they want, they can have the leader of the Adventurers Guild banished from the city, the Lade. Peter of the White Brigade admits he's an adventurer, but he's still a nobody. A man of the realm claims his name is Feltz A. Heimlein, heir to Marcus Heimlein. In the family, one knight looks at the other with fear when the name Heinlein is spoken, and Phelps confirms the current head of the Marcus Heinlein family is his father, and the night before he retreats to his friends. Then Felty blamed someone else for the mistake, dragged the royal knight's name through the mud, and left his sight. The boys there thank the warrior as he says it's all right, no need to thank him. He was angry about what happened those nights, praised Dan for his attitude, and told him to take the girl back to her friends. Rio had been watching from his low window as the adventurers began to leave. Ben Phelps sees him at the window, asks if he is Rio, and Rio says yes. It's a pleasure to meet the warrior. He says he's the leader of the White Brigade, and that Abel told him about Rio, which is true. Rio uses some clever magic. Moda, our hero, says it's fine, and he doesn't have to bring it up if he doesn't want to. Phelps says all he saw was the knight try to charge the adventurers, and then fall to the ground like a fool, all thanks to Rio. Phelps bows to our hero and thanks him on behalf of the adventurers of Loon, then starts to lean forward, but Rio says there's no need. There was a history with Dan, and Dan wouldn't have accepted Rio's help even if Rio had offered it, so he had to do something to the screen to assist. This reinforces Abel's claim that Rio is truly interesting, while Rio wonders what Abel has been telling others about him. White Brigade leader says Abel mentioned our hero at the Great Tide celebration, repeatedly saying it would have been much easier if Rio had been there, adding that Abel rarely praises anyone that much, that Rio was the one who helped the warrior reach the city alive, and that losing a bowl would be disastrous for the city of Loon, so he is very grateful to Rio for keeping him alive and bringing him back. Someone appears at the door and tells the leader it's almost time for them to leave. He thanks Rio and apologizes, saying he has to go. He tells Felt he'd love to talk more another time. As Felt leaves, Rio says he's tired, and a happy smile appears on his face. Our hero sees that both the woman who came for the leader and the leader himself are strong, and he doubts that the heir of an important family should be an adventurer. Later, in the Grand Hall of the Adventurers Guild, bystander notes that it's rare to see him dining alone. Our hero says his 3 friends are out on a mission at the abandoned. He said that even if he sat with Abel, he would not pay for Abel's food, and that as the veteran Abel should be the one paying for Rio, while Abel, flustered, said he had no intention of buying anything for rich rookie adventurers, and Rio said Abel was a cool friend who was overreacting. Our hero notes it's rare to see the warrior eating alone in the middle of the Adventurers Guild and asks where the other party members are, while Abel says being in a party doesn't mean they have to stay together all the time. Rio chuckles and says he understands. He reveals he knows why Abel is alone, and Abel tells him to go ahead and explain. Our hero says it's because he's going to visit the red light district, and Abel calls him an idiot, becomes visibly nervous, and immediately tells Rio never to say that out loud because you never know who might be listening. Rio warns that walls have ears and doors have eyes. Abel says he's never heard the part about doors having eyes and insists he wasn't planning to go to the red light district. Our hero says he knows that's a lie, and repeats that he knows it's a lie. Abel regularly visits a certain girl, nervously shouting that it's not like that, and telling them to shut up. People say if Abel wanted anything with Lynn, they'd start calling him mean nicknames, and he accidentally blurts out that Lynn belongs to Warren, immediately covering his mouth when he realizes he said something he shouldn't have. Rio says it's a pairing of extremes, and as long as there is love, height doesn't matter. Our hero thinks it over and starts calculating, concluding that if it's not her, it must be the other girl. He asks Abel if he's planning to hit on Ria, and Abel, extremely flustered, tells him to stop talking, while Ria then privately feels sorry for Edo, who won't even get a chance to express her feelings in the end. Since arriving in Phi, our hero realizes he hasn't felt attraction or desire for men or women, and he's okay with that. Rio asks Abel if he's doing all right, notes he eats only 1 meal at night, and the warrior says 2 meals would be a bit much, while our hero says he'd just need to move around a little more as Abel looks confused. Rio says he'll need to do more exercise at Mike before bed. Abel asks if he's secretly working for the red light district, and Rare smiles and says no. He argues he could stop shady merchants and seize their money to give to the poor, while Abel says that's still robbery, even if it's for the poor. The hero says the warrior has no sense of humor and decides to stop joking for now. Abel says one of the researchers is a member of the royal family and that not all nights during the escort are safe, and he knows some researchers show up there at night and wants to catch them. Rio admits he clearly does not look like he understands and asks how they will find the mites. Abel says it is simple. They will walk the city and beat up any that cause trouble, and our hero calls that a surprisingly solid plan. It's mag time in the city of Loon, and the full news shines high, lighting everything, while the adventure turns gilded and someone shouts in outrage, demanding to know what madness is happening. They arrived, demanded all the guild's food, and still plan to enter the dungeon today, even intending to break the protective seal, and they're demanding that adventurers act as their personal guards. The guildmaster finishes his speech by saying that UNJOKES have their limits. A heavy silence falls over the 4 in the room as Clive Staples, president of the Central University of the Kingdom, says the king has appointed Count Harold Lawrence to lead the investigation and shows a letter granting full authority, which the guildmaster picks up from the table. Reading the letter, he confirms it requires the guild to provide all necessary support to accommodate the group, but he cannot give away all the guild's food, just as the Mame was about to thank him for understanding. Clives then asks whether the guildmaster knows the meaning of the word accommodate. The guildmaster retorts by asking Mr. President Clive Staples whether he knows the meaning of the phrase as much as possible. Arthur Verices, the court's chief advisor, tells both men to stop arguing and reminds them they are all important leaders of the kingdom. He says he agrees with Hugh that they should ask every guild for food and get other supplies from nearby towns, and Hugh agrees that would help a lot. Clives finally gives in and says fine, you won't bring up the food again, but you won't give up on getting the dungeon unlocked so they can enter. A man warns they don't know what's happening inside the dungeon, and opening it under these conditions could be fatal. The other man replies that the research team was created specifically to examine the dungeon. After a few seconds, the guildmaster says it's fine. Clive is clearly annoyed by the guildmaster's demand that they go at their own risk and sign papers acknowledging this. Heuven says if Clive dislikes the condition, he won't open the dungeon. Arthur tells Clive they have no other option. It tells the guildmaster that hiring adventurers is okay because they still need money to survive. Their master agrees, saying they may accept or refuse the risk, but warns them not to forget. Nobody knows what happens inside a dungeon after a great tide. Explorers can find things never seen before, so they should proceed with caution. Elsewhere in Lune, Rio tells Abel there's something he'd like to ask him. He says he didn't find what he was looking for in the southern library and wants to go to the northern one, but doesn't know if there are any restrictions, while Abel explains a few rules. The warrior says the adventurer entry card is black and Rio should be able to get in, but he will not be allowed into the restricted section. Rio is surprised to learn there is a restricted section, while Abel asks how lucky he feels to have started as a daranking in this city. Our hero then pauses and asks how popular Abel is in this city, since he seems to greet people on the street so often. Our boy notices something to his left as he mentions that many adventurers attended Abel's welcome back party, and Abel ignores Ryo's question and asks what he is staring at so much. Then our hero tells Abel to be quiet while he watches closely, point to your own. As a group walks by, he tells the warrior that those four didn't attend Abel's welcome party. Ryo laughs and says Abel may not be as popular as he thought. While the warrior says he doesn't care about popularity, Abel explains Lune is the only central city with a dungeon so many adventurers come from elsewhere, and Ryo notes the group did look suspicious. Warrior says he didn't see anything suspicious in the group. A member of the group appears to notice they're being watched and turns around. A little later, our hero suggests they might actually have been invited to the party, and Abel says they are not from around here and probably were not. So Rio breathes a sigh of relief and tells Abel that now they know his popularity in the city is not dropping much, while the warrior says he does not care about that. Talking, they slip into an alley behind the strange group they saw earlier, then combat breaks out and quickly goes silent. Rio says it wasn't right for that group to attack them just because Abel is popular, and the attackers now lie defeated on the ground in front of them. The warrior says the hero is just jealous of his popularity. The hero replies that no matter how much people mess with him, that doesn't justify attacking them. As Abel searches the fallen men's pockets, Rio says he doesn't like stealing money, and Abel replies he's looking for their ID cards. Warrior finds something interesting and says it looks like an alchemy tool, and the hero lights up and wants it. The warrior refuses. Rio asks why, and Abel says it's evidence. The card shows the man's name is bothering him and that he is a C-ranked adventurer from the guild in the city of Jakarta. Abelin says Chakalia is the Alliance capital and finds it odd Alliance adventurers are showing up there, so he suggests handing the men over to the guards, while Rio jokes that Abel does something good every now and then. Abel says he always does good things, but our hero says he heard Abel telling everyone that the Great Surge would have been much easier. If Rio had been there, Abel looks surprised and asks how he found out. Phelps leaves an inn and walks calmly through the streets. Someone is closely following him, his personality. The pursuers take positions behind him and draw their swords. A knight says it's time for Phelps to pay for humiliating them that morning, and that even if he is strong, he cannot handle all of them. The knights close in on the warrior with their swords drawn. Sheath, Phelps still fails to notice the armed men closing in on him. Sensing something, he closes his eyes. Immediately, the mates leap at Phelps in a surprise attack. Suddenly, they all freeze, unsure what's happening. They realize they can't move. One of the knights notices something like a needle in his leg. Suddenly, from the darkness behind him, Phelps asks whether he really thought he could defeat him. A shock they may not realize is that the needle in his leg is preventing him from moving. A woman then says Lord Phelps let the knight's outrageous behavior slide and that the trash should be burned to ash. Stretching out her arms, Ben watches as the three knights turn into pillars of fire before her. Turning, she continues walking beside Phelps. In the Mage, Phelps tells Sheen she did an excellent job. Job done. Back at the scene with the adventurers from Jakalia, one of them is still on the way. Coming to, he pushes himself up, unsure what happened, and says those two guys were ridiculously strong. He accepts that the man with the crimson sword was powerful, but still wonders why the mage said they never stood a chance. A second man from the Jacalia group appears to notice a glow and smoke nearby and wonders if something is burning. Then as they move on they enter darkness. Get up, one of them says. The whole situation has become a complete mess, so it would be better to just go back to their rooms in the end. The rest of the group rises slowly, and in pain while the apparent leader is already walking on. Then he turns and tells them to hurry up and move. Turning back to face forward, he finds Sheena walking directly in front of him. She notices him from the corner of her eye. He freezes, recognizing the mage from the White Brigade. As she walks by, he trembles and whispers an apology under his back. She walks on while he remains frozen in place. Some time later, he shouts, asking why the city has so many monsters roaming around. This is where the video ends. To avoid missing the next part, turn on the notification bell.